Welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more. I'm Lexi.
I'm Nicole.
And today is our episode 5 deep dive of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, where we're covering chapters 29 through 38. As always, let's kick it off with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on chapters 29 through 38 of Silver Flames, all of our episodes include spoilers for this entire book and the ACOTAR series as a whole. While the majority of each Silver Flames episode does not include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas' series, our deep dive of this book will continue in our Maasverse Madness segment. At the end of every episode, we will give a big spoiler warning before we bring in references from other SJM books, specifically the Crescent City series.
So with all that said, if you don't know why the two words never again will never not bring me to tears, then please go finish this book. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
I'm pretty sure every episode going forth, we will have a sex scene in our coverage, but Cassian and Nesta officially go all the way this time. And of course, we're going to be talking about it. So do be mindful of those little listening ears.
Friendly reminder as we deep dive Silver Flames, we recognize this book is divisive among the fandom, and it's okay for this community to have different opinions about characters and perspectives. With that said, please do be respectful both to us and to others as the conversation continues on other channels. Additionally, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events.
We can't wait to be at the Swords and Shadows Masquerade party on November 23rd in just a few weeks less than now. I'm so excited. We also cannot wait to ring in the new year at Fantastic Collection's New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
We are partnering with Barnes & Noble for the ONYX Storm midnight release party on January 20th, 2025 in Glendale, Colorado.
We also have so much in store as podcast partners at Romantasy BookCon in Los Angeles, California on February 20th through 22nd in 2025.
We'll also be featured guests at Enchanticon in St. Louis, Missouri, August 15th through 17th, 2025.
Links to all of these events, plus information on how to get tickets, reserve your spots, all the goodies are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, a book club. This month is Daughter of No World. We're so excited. Exclusive author interviews, community events, promo codes for live events, plus a 20% off discount and merch link. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That's all for $10 a month. And last but not least, we have our Inner Circle, which includes everything from the first 2 tiers, plus behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift, giveaways, private Discord channel, and your name shouted out on the podcast. And that is for $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also, of course, in the show notes. And really and truly, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. As we've turned this podcast into our livelihood, it's all because of you, and we appreciate you so much.
And now it is time to venture into the Bog of Oorid.
Dun, 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 dun. As always, to kick off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So gather around, friends. We need an Inner Circle Debrief for Silver Flames, chapters 29 through 38.
Chapter 29. On another middle-of-the-night stair-stepper adventure, Nesta gets to step 3,000 before giving up. After all, she's only in her nightgown. What would she do if she got to the bottom? I don't know, Nesta. Have you seen what these kids are wearing these days? Nesta may be determined to find the trove before Brialyn, but she 100% does not want to try scrying. So Smart House Pat kindly gives her a glass of water for her efforts. And also some bones and stones. Yeah, not happening yet, Pat. Smash cut to the Inner Circle monthly court dinner. Amryn, much like Smart House Pat, is set on Cassian getting Nesta to look for the trove. Cassian assures everyone that Nesta is trying. Way to defend your girl! But the tiny ancient one is not feeling as giving as the water boy Smart House Pat. Amryn gives Nesta 1 week or they will try other methods, including using Elaine to manipulate Nesta. Haven't we talked about being nice, Amryn? 3 days later, in the library, Gwen and Nesta run into Meryl, who is irate about Nesta swapping out the books. Yes, she knew all along. Nesta, using her slay my enemy's nature, tells Meryl to fuck off and defends her friend, who Nesta finds out is a quarter nymph. The next day, inspired by Nesta's bravery, 3 more priestesses join. Welcome to the chat, Rosalind, Deirdre, and Ananka. If these priestesses can be brave, so can Nesta. So she tries scrying, finally, and nothing happens, except unleashing a power upon her in a nightmare that night, causing a huge stir where Cassian and Azriel burst into her room, seeing her bathed in silver fire. Rhys joins the midnight sesh and pulls Nesta out of her nightmare, smothering the flames, which has Rhys freaked the fuck out because her power is pure death. Whatever that means. That's one chapter. Chapter 30. Nesta wakes up with Cassian at her side, like a knight guarding his lady awkwardly in a chair. Nesta declines to talk about what happened and instead likes Cassian's priorities of breakfast much, much more. I vibe with that so hard. At training, Nesta and Gwen continue bonding, this time not over new romance novels, but instead over their shared experience with regular nightmares. Later, Cassian reports for duty at the river house, and well, shit, the baby has wings. That's very bad because Feyre will have such high complications that it puts her life at risk during labor. But no one tell Feyre, because nothing bad can come from that, right? Also, don't tell Timmy Tam, because homeboy is still on the struggle bus, and if he hears this, he might lose it altogether. Chapter 31.
Because he hasn't already.
Chapter 31. Nesta chilling in the dining room as Cassian strolls in. Kind of. He limps in. Turns out that he had a nice long sparring session with Rhys. You should see the other guy vibes. Cassian is sipping on some soup. Insert good soup meme here. And he spills the soup beans about the baby having wings. Basically, Feyre is fucked. But remember, don't tell Feyre. Bravery hits Nesta again and she wants to try scrying another time. Cassian's like, cool. But can we also talk about how we should oral bang again and soon? Fun fact. Did you know Nesta loved it when Cassian fucked her mouth? Fun fact number 2. Did you know that Cassian wants to fuck Nesta on every surface of the house? Calm down, Lexi. But deciding Cassian's body will be her reward. She tries scrying the next day. And after making the study so cold that penguins could march through, Nesta is broken out of her chilly trance with a steamy Cassian kiss. That's one way to hard launch a relationship. We find out the mask is in the Bog of Oorid, aka the middle, chapter 32. Off to the bog! Rhys and Feyre see off the trio of Cassian, Azriel, and Nesta, winnowing to the Bog of Oorid. And my god, this place seems like a lovely vacation spot. They fly over the bog, waiting for Nesta to feel something, which she does. But looking back for his brother, Cassian sees that Azriel is gone. He really cannot catch a break with these 2 or ash arrows. Chapter 33. Cassian swoops down to find Azriel is duking it out with 24 Autumn Court soldiers. Hey, weren't you all missing from Eris? So Cassian puts Nesta in a tree, not Kissing, but instead he flies over to help Azriel. Nesta gets impatient and scared for her friends' life and climbs down, only to find a pair of large black eyes looking at her from under the water. Chapter 34. Nesta pees herself at what emerges from the water, and honestly, I would too. The large horror movie level Kelpie begins to speak to her and pulls her under the dark, inky, watery depths back to Cassian and Azriel. They killed everyone except for 2 soldiers, because you gotta save at least something for interrogations. But when they go back to where Cassian left Nesta, she is nowhere to be seen. Chapter 35. Under the sea, aka the bog. Nesta thrashes and attempts to stab the Kelpie. He didn't like that though, so he breathes air into her lungs, pulling her deeper into the water. Nesta fumbles for something, anything within her power. And did you know that like calls to like? And it looks like there's a Cauldron made mask in the water. Chapter 36. Slamming the mask onto her face, Nesta calls out to the dead, "Minions, tonight we take the Kelpie!" Above the water, Cassian is in an absolute panic. But what's that? Nesta rises from the water with her undead army and the Kelpie's head in her hand. That's a different take on the aerial part of your world ending. Nesta removes the mask and collapses. Chapter 37. Back in the Hume City, the soldiers got nothing. Seems like they're under the influence of some sort. What could that mean? The Inner Circle leaves the dungeons only to find Nesta is chilling in a highly warded room staring at the mask. What? The door was unlocked. The decision is made. Sex god Helion knows better warding spells and will teach them to Rhys so no one can get to the mask. Later, in Lexi's dream bedroom in the Moonstone Palace, Cassian enters while Nesta is in the infinity pool. Come on in, Cassian. The water's fine. And bang, bang, bangly bang. I said, thanks for the ride, Nest. Bang! bang! Chapter 38. What's training without a little gossip? Emery and Gwen immediately fall into morning after girl talk, but Cassian can smell that shit from a mile away. More reps, ladies, because you can't stop talking. To ease Nesta's new distraction, Gwen tells her about a Valkyrie technique called mind stilling, but Cassian orders Nesta to grab a sword, not that kind, a wooden one. As Cassian teaches Nesta the 8 different sword positions, again, not that kind, Nesta vows to never again be weak, which I will be breaking out in tears about later.
Comfy season is officially upon us, as if it ever left for us. And MeUndies, our favorite company that makes the most comfortable underwear in the world, also makes the coziest loungewear that's perfect for this holiday season. From lounge pants to hoodies, sweats, and onesies, MeUndies is here to remind all of us that it's never too early to start thinking about gift ideas. What could be better than the gift of comfort from MeUndies? Also, it has a lot of stuff for couples too, and I just always love that so much.
MeUndies has a cut for every butt, with 10 different styles that come in over 100 different colors and prints, ranging from black to all over dinosaurs to holiday penguins. You all know I love my narwhals. It's great. And like Lexi said, MeUndies is not just about underwear. Explore the lounge collection featuring joggers, crew necks, pajamas, and more.
My favorite thing about MeUndies is that they use sustainably sourced materials and they work with partners that truly care for their workers. And hey, if you're not happy with your first pair of MeUndies, it's on MeUndies.
Kick off lounge season with MeUndies and get 20% off your first order plus free shipping at MeUndies.com/FFG and enter promo code FFG. That's MeUndies.com/FFG, code FFG for 20% off plus free shipping. MeUndies, comfort from the outside in.
It's time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing, theories, and oh, so much more. We open with Nesta making it to step 3000 on the stairs as she chases away the remnants of a familiar dream where Hybern breaks her father's neck. It is instinct to head to the stairs after awakening in a cold sweat, again illustrating how this has become her comforting escape. But the stair trip has also fueled her need to find the dread trove. She's failed at every task the Inner Circle has ever given to her. Like we were talking so much last episode about her own goal for the priestesses to start training and how it tied directly to her own successes and failures, this is pointedly her reflecting on failing the others. And while she's not ready to try scrying yet, much to the House of Wind's dismay, she recognizes the urgency, not just to potentially stop a war, but to not let the others or herself down. I wonder if the bad dream was prompted by her feelings of being alone and the silence pressing in on her in the dining room earlier that evening. She feels left out when Cassian and Azrael aren't there and they don't tell her why. And while Nesta realizes that she, quote, made a point to be as unpleasant as possible for well over a year now, she has started feeling part of something with Cassian and even Az up here at the House of Wind.
Don't you think we're going to blow past stair math like that? And I know I promised last episode that I would not be adjusting my algorithm, but I am again, and I have very good reason.
Like, we're talking about grading you, so are you at an F right now for your stair math?
I think I am, but I hope to make it up for it with super, super smart math, because Sammy with an L on our Discord tapped into her, and I quote, Math Guy, and Math Guy created an equation for us because I was not taking into account, because I was frankly too scared, that the staircase is a spiral staircase. And I'm honestly just going to quote exactly what her Math Guy told her, because I would not be able to say it better myself. According to the International Building Stair Code.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
For a spiral staircase, the tread of a step on the flat surface that you step on needs to be a minimum of 7.5 inches deep at 12 inches from the center of the spiral staircase. This means that if you picture a spiral staircase step, it's actually like a triangle. It's much wider on the outside and it's super, super tiny on the inside where it meets the center. The IBC also said that there needs to be a maximum tread height of 9.5 inches, but we know from the book that each step is 12 inches high. So we're actually going to send Reese a violation for breaking building stair code. Bad,
Wait,
Reese.
real quickly, can I just say, I used to do marketing for an inspection company, and I never thought I would see these words again.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So all of this math means that it would be 12 steps per revolution of the staircase. So we take all those numbers and assume that Nesta is walking at the minimum path at 12 inches away from the wall. She would take a helix path from the top to the bottom of the staircase. This would be a circumference of 24 inches in that circle. With that said, what does that mean?
You know what
tell you.
24 inches in circumference.
You'd be dead if it was 24 inches in circumference. All that said, the formula for the length of the helix, aka the distance that Nesta would travel, is the number of wraps times the square root of the circumference squared plus the pitch squared. If that was gibberish, allow me to just summarize real quick.
I don't understand anything you just said. Like, I understand the ancient language of the Fae better than whatever you just said. And also, where did your Pythagorean theorem? I can't even say it right.
My Pythagorean theorem is long out the window. This math guy brought in the word helix and pitch squared. I don't even know what a helix is. It's like a spinny. It's a spinny thing that moves down. It's a shape. Look it up.
Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm smart in English stuff, okay?
So Nesta here makes it to step 3,000, which means she takes 250 revolutions of the stairs, which TLDR is 0.43 miles one way or 0.69 nice kilometers one way. Or for Lexi, this would be 1.9 trips down the Empire State Building. Does that make more sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So a huge shout out to Sammy with an L and her math guy, because honestly, she made a spreadsheet with the algorithm and all the stair mentions in it. Like, I am in awe of you. And yes, we'll probably put some kind of social media post about it at some point before Silver Flames is up, because honestly, it's too beautiful to just be for our eyes. And Lexi can't even understand it. So we'll put it up somewhere. But there you go. Stair math is not done, but stair math is at least got a better algorithm.
It has a spreadsheet now with a math guy. Oh my God. Back to Nesta. Little does she know that they're at their monthly court dinner at the River House, which, two quick things here. Number one, I know Cassian's not obligated to, but maybe leave a note that you're working tonight to make Nesta feel a little better that she's all alone in the house. I don't know. I know that she usually eats her dinner in her room, but come on, leave a note. And number two, they only have a court meeting once a month. We, Fantasy Fangirls, have a weekly team meeting. I can't even fathom a formal team meeting ruling over the largest territory only once a month. No wonder they all have so much extra time to train and be uber winners and such.
Their to-do list is very short versus our 1.5 hour team meetings are like, the to-do lists are beefy boys.
Or maybe that's also why it's like a full evening, is because they wait for everything for a whole month.
No, it's a full evening because they go through bottles and bottles of wine, and by the end, they're
I want that for our team meetings.
Okay, good to know at noon on a Tuesday.
I know. I don't actually want it. Anyway, I just had to point that out. At this monthly dinner meeting, the conversation, of course, shifts to Nesta's supposed attempts at hunting down the Dread Trove.
Reese and Amra chastise Nesta's current methods, saying that she is not really trying, she's having the priestesses try. Us, in Nesta's mind and in her POV, we know that there's so much more to it than that. But given Reese and Amran's beliefs about Nesta, this very much lines up with what they know her to be as kind of I'll call it a half-asser. So Amran, in true Amran, I don't let emotions cloud my judgment fashion, says that she has a week. And if they have to use the threat of going to Elaine to manipulate Nesta into scrying, they will do so. Which Cassian, who knows Nesta and who knows how she's trying, she's deeply traumatized by what happened the last time she scried, he doesn't like this plan. And from Amran, quote, "You just have to shut up and do as you're told." Even Varian is like, babe, that's a little harsh, don't you think? To be fair, this does seem a little harsh even for Amran. She is very practical. And yes, her reasoning to make Nesta scry, it makes sense. The weight of the world is on their shoulders yet again. But woof, I do wonder why this venom is coming out of her, because it's normally not this venomous. So I do wonder if she's mad at Cassian for sleeping with her, or if she's almost like, oh, you're falling under her spell just like I did, or if she's just that pissed at Nesta still.
I think that's what it is. Well, first of all, I will say, I think Amren saying Nesta gets one more week before they resort to Elaine is very fair.
I'm not saying the outcome or the goal is not fair. I definitely think it is. It's the venom that's in her voice telling Cassian to shut up and do as he's told.
I also do think that she is very angry at Nesta still. She gave Nesta her friendship. She gave Nesta the benefit of the doubt for a very long time, and Nesta threw that in her face. And Amren could hold a grudge. So I understand why she is particularly venomous towards Nesta, especially with Nesta not willing to do something that is absolutely necessary. And that goes right back to why she and Nesta got into a huge argument in the first place. Nesta was not willing to test out her powers then, and Amren's like, you need to do this for your own well-being. And Nesta essentially scoffed in her face and told her no. And I think that this is also pretty in character with Amren. Like, she has been mean, but in the past, when things are really in crunch time, she's like,
That's true.
like, stop with your emotions here. We got to get shit done.
That's true. I think back to like ACOWAR in some of those meetings where she is not nice, not so nice.
They are racing against the clock before Brie Allen can get her hands on the Dread Trove. And our crew literally have 2 people who can track the trove. Understandably, it's risky and not the favored option. I truly get Nesta's hesitancy and trauma associated with scrying. I don't know. Like I said, I have to agree with Amren that getting the priestesses like Gwen to research for her is not exactly exhausting every other option when time is of the essence. Naturally, Cassian defends Nesta and reiterates why scrying is difficult for her, and it's not fair to manipulate her with the threat of using Elaine instead. Interestingly, Azriel pushes back that there is an innate darkness to the Dread Trove that Elaine shouldn't be exposed to. Oh, Az, who's coddling Elaine now? Sorry, that's not a dig at Az, just an observation that he is trying to protect her.
I wrote the same freaking thing in my notes because I was like, can everyone stop coddling Elaine? Oh my God, she doesn't want it anymore.
Well, Cassian shoots back, but Nesta should. Now, I will say that the darkness of the cauldron and that power of death is already within Nesta. That innate darkness is part of her, as Reese will soon find out firsthand. Because she took that power unwillingly from the cauldron, while the cauldron gifted Elaine magic that is softer and lighter, for lack of a better term. But I also love how Amren sticks up for Elaine and tells Azriel not to underestimate her. It's basically what Elaine said to the crew during the original conversation. Amren is a female on a mission, and as within her character, she'll do whatever means necessary, feelings be damned, to not lose the advantage like they did last time. I'm not going to give her an L here because I get her perspective, but I will retweet what Varian reminds her of to, be nice.
Yes, agreed. It's not even a lowercase L. It's just
a
start.
ooh.
It's an ooh.
Side note, which you did touch on last episode, Nicole, Elaine excused herself from the meeting early like Farah, and Cassian has a feeling that her excuse of having to get up early isn't necessarily true. First of all, love that she was part of this monthly court meeting in the first place. Second, I wonder if it has to do with her reacquainting herself with her powers like she had said that she was going to do in the original meeting. Or is there really romantic tension between her and Azriel that she wants to, distance herself from? Or she's worried more than she lets on about the impending issues in the world that the Inner Circle is dealing with. And she doesn't want to be part of the conversation when it turns to the Dread Trove and her and Nesta. I don't know, it just feels like such a little Easter egg of a line. 4 days later, while in the priestess's library, Houston, we have a problem. Gwen is terrified because Meryl is pissed after she realized that Nesta swapped volumes 7 and 8 in her office right out from under her nose. And she's here to confront Nesta, dun dun dun. Because see, Meryl knew from the start that Gwen gave her the incorrect book. But when she went to grab that book, she found the correct volume instead. Oh no! And it had Nesta's scent all over it. How dare anybody? Nobody fools Meryl, descendant of Rabbath, Lord of the Western Wind!
Which, pause, because we have to talk about these juicy Easter eggs that Meryl drops here. First off, she mentions how the wind whispers to her even down in the library. We know this language so very well. First, from the Bone Carver and his Death God siblings, also from Lanthus. We also get it from Amren too. This is how powerful Meryl is, that she's on the same playing field as these insane characters, at least when it comes to listening. Also, at least when it comes to
sonic ears,
This is also how Coach J communicates to Brie Allen, whispering to her on the wind. So are they connected? Some people think that Meryl might be bad because she's being influenced by Coach J. I don't know if I'm quite convinced of that yet, but I'm going to keep an ear out for it. Just like Meryl does on the Western Wind. Secondly, we get this line, quote, I am a descendant from Rabbath, Lord of the Western Wind. I looked high and fucking low for anything on Rabbath and Western Wind. Here's what I found on Rabbath. Trying different spellings, all I could find was Rabbath Ammon, a ancient city, and I am apologizing if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It's an ancient city that was conquered by an Egyptian king in the 3rd century BCE. Also in Hebrew, the meaning of Rabbah, it's basically Rabah, so there's no th at the end. It means to become many, become numerous, multiply, to be, to grow great. You get the picture. To be honest, nothing really stood out to me. So then I looked at Western Wind, and all I could find was the Greek god Zephyrus, who is the Greek god of the Western Wind. Zephyrus is also associated with flowers, springtime, and procreation. So maybe it's a little bit of a nod to some spring court, but I do feel like some dots are missing there, so I'm not really sure. Then in the Bible, West Wind symbolizes deliverance and mercy. Again, nothing super huge there. And last but not least, because this is really what was just like, oh, this clicked into place. This is the key that enters the lock. The Western Wind is a banger song from Carly Rae Jepsen. Yes, the Call Me Maybe Girl. And I think it's Meryl's new theme song.
I've never heard the Western Wind song, but now it's Call Me Maybe really is definitely going to be stuck in my head for the rest of the day.
It's a great song. I'm not going to lie. I might add it to the playlist because it's just so good.
Not only is Nesta not afraid of Meryl, it especially gets under Nesta's skin how Meryl is treating Gwen, insulting her and causing Gwen to cower. These two females have been training together to never feel powerless again. And here is a female priestess bully, making Nesta's good-hearted friend feel less than. And Nesta definitely won't stand for it. So she does what no other priestess dares to do. She goes toe-to-toe with Meryl and doesn't let this bully ruffle her feathers. In fact, Nesta dishes it right back at Meryl by, in fact, being the bigger person, never thought I'd say that about Nesta, and turning Meryl's behavior back on herself, saying things like, quote, clear off and let us work in peace. And my personal favorite, quote, with a fancy title like that, surely such a petty grudge should be beneath you. Not only does Nesta wield her words, but perhaps for the first time, she lets the power within her simmer to the surface. This is the most in control we've seen Nesta with her power. And it's just the beginning of her starting to embrace her power and letting it crackle while still ignoring its wild and unholy depths. She is certainly a force to be reckoned with, not just how she stands up to bullies, but her own power. Sure, Meryl, you have wind whispering to you, but our girl Nesta has the raw power of the fucking cauldron within her. Beat that!
I don't know. Meryl has Carly Rae Jepsen behind her, so it's really potato on that front.
It's okay, Nesta's got lick my pussy and
This encounter will lead to 3 priestesses, Rosalind, Deirdre, and Ananka, to join training.
Wah! That's so huge. I love it so much. They saw Nesta demonstrate her inner strength and stand up to a bully. I know I keep saying that phrase, but it's so true. And they're like, I want to be able to do that too. I love it so much. The priestesses will even look to Nesta, and while she'll think she's not the leader, Cassian will kind of be like, yeah, you are. Nesta is becoming a role model in a way she never imagined herself to be, though she hasn't quite recognized herself as such yet. A few episodes ago, we mentioned how it's important for Nesta to be around people like Emery, who are a few steps ahead of her on her healing journey, which make the impossible goals of getting better feel more tangible. While yes, Emery's trauma still absolutely weighs down on her, she is a business owner and a bold female with self-confidence to be her own person, and Nesta sees how she can be like that too. That's what Nesta is becoming for these priestesses, like that person who's a few steps further along in their goal to make the big goal not seem so scary. At the end of the day, it's not even the actual situation of standing up to a bully like Meryl. It's about having the courage and strength to do something like that. Like Gwen said after Meryl stormed off, quote, next time, perhaps I'll have the courage to do it myself.
From Meryl's anger, we do learn that Gwen is part nymph, 1/4 nymph to be exact. And this explains why Gwen is so good at balancing and movement. Her limbs are quite pliable. Quote, my grandmother was a river nymph who seduced a high fae male from the autumn court. This is interesting. Now, this would have been her mother's parentage, because Gwen does go on to say how her mother was unwanted by the nymphs in the river of the spring court, but also could not endure the confinement of the forest house in the autumn court. So instead, she was given to the temple in Saint-Grava, which is in the night court, and was raised there. But then she partook in the great rite when she was of age, and Gwen and her twin sister Katrin were the result of that knightly union. We should note that this does not exactly say the great rite in spring, but we can assume that it is both because of the size of the event and how when Freyr went, there were fairies from all sorts of different courts because some didn't have masks, but also because she would have been conceived when Amarantha was in charge, and the other courts weren't really celebrating like spring. But wow! We got to talk about this. There's two theories in particular that I want to bring up here. Number one is that Gwen might be Tamlin's daughter because of her mother's participation in the Great Rite. Personally, I really don't think so, mainly because there's no similarities in how they look, and particularly in stories that does tend to be the wink, wink, hint, hint for us readers. Think Lucian and Helion have a lot of those similar characteristics. The other reason I do not think it's Tamlin is because anyone can bang, bang, bangity bang after the High Lord has chosen his partner for the evening and takes her into the cave after he's killed the white stag, all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't say that Gwen's mother was chosen at the Great Rite. Instead, it says that Gwen's mother partook in the Great Rite. So with all that said, there's another theory that she might be Lucian's daughter, which makes a lot more sense to me. First and foremost, Gwen is 28. Lucian is 300 plus. So aging definitely works out there. And then also, I can't ignore the looks. Her hair is very similar color. The fact that she sometimes glows. This could definitely be a nod to the day court. I will have much more to say on that later. But I do want to point out that if this is the case, LOL, because Asriel would be between Lucian's mate and Lucian's daughter, if that's the case, which is just delicious.
I think that would be really good storytelling, to be honest. I am definitely in the court that she is Lucian's daughter, if she is anybody's daughter that we do know of.
There is some speculation that she's Baron's daughter, which I wouldn't be shocked, but I'd be icked about, that's for sure.
Now, her grandfather could be Baron or Eris because they are both High Fae from the Autumn Court. I think that's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. For all sorts of reasons, yeah.
Well, before we move on, many of you have asked how we find the energy to dive into these wild rabbit hole crack theories, and we have an answer for you because the answer is Element. Element helps anyone stay hydrated without the sugar and other dodgy ingredients found in popular electrolyte and sports drinks.
Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix and sparkling electrolyte water born from the growing body of research revealing that optimal health outcomes occur at sodium levels 2 to 3 times government recommendations. Each stick pack or sparkling can delivers a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial colors, or other not-so-good ingredients. Element is formulated for anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration, and it's perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or those following keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets.
If you've been following Fantasy Fangirls for a while, you know that we love Element, specifically their new sparkling cans. The watermelon salt, I've also gotten on a citrus salt sparkling kick recently. It's the best way to recover from my HIIT workouts. I love it.
Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Element order. This is a great way to try 8 flavors or share Element with a friend. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/FFG. This deal is only available through our link. You got to go to drinklmnt.com/FFG. Also, like we were saying, try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water.
Later that night, it turns out that Amren's threats to use Elaine to make Nesta scry were unnecessary because she sits with Cassian in the Smart House Pat private library with bones and stones in an earthenware bowl in front of her. It's so sweet how she wants Cassian here for the scrying. She tells herself that it's only for caution, if she loses control, if she can't tell where her fingers end up on the map. But that's just what she tells herself. Deep down, she wants to have him here. Yes, this is huge mate foreshadowing, but this is also because he's been so supportive of Nesta since the beginning of her journey in this book. And that is now something she can see him doing for her outside of training too. Back in ACOWAR, he was able to steady her during her first scrying despite being terribly injured. Remember, his guts were hanging out just a few hours prior. And now she lets that same warmth and strength seep into her.
Nesta may be afraid of scrying and the risks it poses, but she's more afraid of being a cowardly hypocrite. She recognized how big of a deal it was for the priestesses to step so far out of their comfort zone and join training, which means she feels it's only right for her to do that too in this different form. Quote, "I am asking them to be brave, to work hard, to face their fears, yet I'm not doing the same. Just as she inspired them to tap into their courage and begin taking their power back, they've inspired her to do the same and put forth the effort of tracking down the trove, even if it terrifies her.
However, it looks like this round is not gonna be quite the ticket, because in order to scry, her mind must be wholly clear. Here, when she closes her eyes and everything begins to fill her, it's everything from her failures, her fears. They all echo in her ears, making it impossible for that mind to become clear. Trying to bring her mind back to the task at hand, she thinks, quote, the dread trove. She had to find the dread trove. You can feel the desperation and the clawing towards what she wants here. But then there's that very real part of her that also doesn't want to find it. She fears what happened before, fairly, and with this opposition, she wants it, but she's also terrified it. Only yawning emptiness answers her.
It's also like she's calling out into the void here, unsure how to tap into the magic connecting her to the dread trove. While later, when she successfully scries, it'll be like she wades into the connection and that darkness before trying to target the location of the trove, or rather the mask. There's a big difference in her approach because I agree, this time is riddled with fear and trying to keep this barrier from the darkness. Like she's looking for something by just calling out to it from like her other little edge, like on the other side, you know? While next time she'll lean into her connection, roll up her sleeves, and really search for it. Although the scrying seemed to lead to nothing whatsoever, the essence of the cauldron's power was indeed listening, and the scrying turned out to be a tripwire. It's my understanding, emphasis on that the scrying activated Nesta's worst memories of being in the cauldron, which drew the cauldron's darkness to her and led it to search her out in the House of Wind that night. In the midst of her nightmare, she kind of wakes up, but is unable to move or even open her eyes, despite being able to feel its presence and being terrified how it approaches her and fills her body.
Nesta's not the only one who is awoken in the middle of the night. Cassian bolts out of bed with terror and dread slicing through him, not from a nightmare, but instead from instincts. Mating instincts, perhaps?
Well, hold on now, because Azrael is also woken up here. So I think, well, yes, there is a mating instincts component to it, especially with the innate terror and dread Cassian feels. The house is begging him and Azrael to come to Nesta's rescue. So, like, I think the house actually is what really and truly woke them up.
See, I actually think that Cassian was woken up from instincts, and Azrael either heard Cassian wake up, because Cassian like ran to the door, and like I know it was already open because the house was like, go, go, go. But I could see Azrael having woken up from Cassian like fumbling about. Or Azrael was already awake, because we know he's been up in the middle of the night. And so he almost like heard a disturbance and he started running too. Because the reason I'm like leaning more towards this being mating instincts is because I also can't help but think of when Feyre was woken up in the middle of the night to get Rhys from his dream. Now that was obviously like the shadows were like coming into her room, but I think it was definitely from I feel a disturbance within my mate.
I can definitely see that. That's a good point. Yes.
This one goes a little differently, though, than the Rhys and Feyre moment, because Cassian runs to Nesta's room, closely followed by the sprinting Azrael and a bursting through the windows Rhys. What an entrance, my guy. Frantically opening the door, they see Nesta laying in her bed, screaming and bathed in silver flames. These flames are cold beyond reason, and they don't destroy any of the bedding, only, quote, writhing as if devouring her.
There is certainly some ambiguity to the scene, so I'm going to do my best to explain it in a straightforward way, at least as I perceive Nesta's power and this instance with the cauldron's darkness. I think of Nesta's power as twofold. One is how she is an extension of the cauldron with her ability to make objects and imbue the cauldron's powerful magic into these objects. The other is on display here, her power of death, which takes a tangible form of silver flames, cold like death itself. This is the power she ripped from the cauldron that it was unwilling to give. We'll get more into this exact power here shortly. The cauldron may be hidden far away on Cretea, but its essence can move around, as we learned in ACOWAR. When Nesta sought out the cauldron-made dread trove as she scried, she awoke its darkness. Because she is so deeply connected to the cauldron's darkness, this activated her level 10 nightmare. And of course, we know that she already has bad nightmares anyway, but this is like next level, holy shit kind of nightmare. And in combination, the cauldron's darkness has sought her out and entangled itself with her, amplifying her nightmare to this release of power and torment. We have to ask, is the cauldron punishing Nesta for getting too close to it? Kind of like what the cauldron did after she scried in ACOWAR, where this is like a form of torturing her. Or is it drawn to her more in a like calls to like way, that when it fills her, the consequence is this awakening of her death power with the silver flames? Her power has been roiling within her for more than a year, wrangled into constant submission. And between the scrying tripwire and the darkness of the cauldron seeking her out and attaching itself to her, it's finally opened the floodgates. So it's like the darkness of the cauldron lit the match, and with the gas already there, made Nesta go up in flame, literally. I'm personally leaning more into the latter, that this is not the cauldron punishing her, but it's rather the darkness being drawn to her and really amplifying with the nightmare where her powers are on full display with all the intertwiningness with it.
Same. Yep, me too.
Luckily, quote, night burst in full of shadows and wind and stars. Thank goodness! Our most powerful High Lord Rhys is here to match her power, smothering her icy fire with his darkness. Question, how did he get in past the wards? I'm assuming he winnowed to the edge of the house's wards and his power was so fierce that it caused the burst of windows and he surged into the room or something. Or as we know, the house is sentient and honestly may have magically allowed him to appear in the room. Anyway, that's neither here or there. It was just a question I had. Because we have two great and terrible powers battling one another, like, quote, swords clashing in battle, fighting for the advantage. It's so good that Rhys is here, not just because he's the only one with power to combat Nesta's, but he has also lost control of his powers in his dreams. Like Nicole mentioned, remember back in ACOSF, how his nightmares led to his power of darkness dangerously swirling around him. He knows what it's like to lose control of your powers while sleeping, even if these are very different circumstances. When Rhys can't get through to Nesta with his attempts of calling her name and yelling at her to wake up, which are what would work for him when he's having his nightmares, Cassian pushes forward. To hell with the risks of getting caught in the middle of Rhys and Nesta's power battle. With a steady calm, Cassian says, Nesta. Not shouting like Rhys is doing, because his soothing voice can get through to Nesta in a way no one else possibly can. Her consciousness and power shifts just long enough to him, giving Rhys's magic the opportunity to send a soft wave over the flame. Cassian's calming presence distracted Nesta's raging power enough for Rhys to be able to enter her mind and make it recede, so she can come back into her control of her own mind and body.
With Nesta calmed back down and the silver fire smothered, Rhys sits down and has a what the fuck did I just see moment. Yes, because of how intense her powers are, and it's unlike anything he's ever experienced, but mostly because of what he witnessed when he went into her mind to calm her down. He saw, and most importantly, felt her go into the cauldron. He felt every moment of what she took from it in her rage and felt what it took from her. Rhys's eyes are filled with remorse and agony as he says, quote, her trauma is... I guessed, but it was different to feel it. Rhys had guessed. And at first, back in ACOWAR, I do believe she went through something traumatic was at the top of his mind when interacting with Nesta. It's why he had, I'll call it, more patience with her. But over time, that top of mind was replaced with believing her to be cruel, rude, lazy, among many other negative things. And don't get me wrong, she was cruel. I'm not ignoring that. But this is the moment where it finally clicks for Rhys. Why Nesta has been so terrible and cruel.
It's what Cassian has understood since the beginning, and why he's been so mad at especially Rhys for not sympathizing with her trauma and how much it has shaped her current state.
It's like logically Rhys knew, but feeling and experiencing, reliving her trauma was what really put it into perspective of just how much Nesta is dealing with on any given moment. And I also want to point out, Rhys knows what it's like to be dealing with a bunch of shit underneath the surface and putting on a totally cool and calm and collected exterior. So it is very much in alignment with these two being very similar. Does Rhys's behavior massively shift after this encounter with Nesta? No, but it subtly does. He's less lash out-y until Feyre learns about the baby and all that kind of stuff, but that's a different story. And he's much less likely to taunt her as his first go-to tactic. In a way, it does shift his internal feelings towards Nesta, allowing him to understand where she might be coming from.
Exactly. He doesn't do a 180 of his opinion about her by any means, but he backs off from his jumping to conclusions default he's been in for a while. Again, that's all excluding telling Feyre about the baby part. Our crew is only just beginning to comprehend Nesta's powers. No one, least of all Nesta, has understood them. Amren has recognized more than anyone how great and terrible her power is, which is why she pushed Nesta to figure out her power and treat it with respect and caution. But after this, the Bat Boys are realizing just how how dark her powers are, taken directly from the depths of the cauldron. While we'll continue the conversation about Nesta's powers and exactly what they are throughout this deep dive, I want to take a moment and discuss what this power of death might really mean, because we have to understand that this power of death may be the result of being in a limited narrator POV, and she actually has more than just the dark power from the cauldron. She may have both the power of life and death, because that is the essence of the cauldron. Think of how she made the House of Wind to have sentience, and how she'll imbue magic into the bracelets. When she saves Farah and the baby, yes, she is leveraging the power of the troth, but what if her power of life contributes to that too? I'll touch on this concept of power of life more when we get to that point, especially after we'll have deep dived the whole book and see all the little nuances of Nesta's powers to draw upon. But for right now, let's talk about that darkness of Nesta's power and how it may be more prevalent because that is her nature. In her rage, hatred, and revenge she took from the cauldron, it would make sense that the power she took is a piece of the cauldron and all that it encompasses, but the darkness and death manifests more prominently because that captures Nesta's emotions best. It's like the cauldron's darkness intertwines and is magnified by her own darkness, I suppose is the best way of putting it. We have to ask ourselves, what does this power of death truly mean? We saw her burst of power, not unlike the cauldrons that incinerated 1,000 Illyrians at the final battle when she went up against the King of Hybern, and then we'll see it again in a different form when she kills Brialyn. And death is, of course, associated with cold, which is exactly what Nesta's silver flames are. They are icy and cold and like death. I believe this is why the silver flames within Nesta are the palpable representation of her dark power. It is the darkness that frightens Gwen coming from the pit of the library and the inky black depths of the cauldron that draw this terrible power. And while it certainly has been irresponsible of Nesta to ignore her powers, I can understand why she's so scared of them. She associates her power with darkness, with the worst powers of the cauldron, with death and destruction. That's not something you want to play around with like water butterflies. As we continue our conversation about Nesta's powers throughout this deep dive, I also want to point out we readers have to understand that this is a magical world where our comprehension of powers aren't always tangible. Am I saying that because I really struggled with trying to describe what the heck her power of death truly means? Yes. But seriously though, it honestly might be impossible to truly describe this power of death. It's a feeling like Rhys has when he goes into her mind. It's an aura where Nesta lets her power simmer to the surface. Part of the point is that it is mysterious and depthless and unique because she took that raw power directly from the cauldron.
Agreed on all fronts. Feyre's powers were much more cut and dry because we had access to the knowledge of them, just like our characters, before within each of the High Lords. Whereas Nesta is very much an anomaly. I'll also even throw Rhysand in there as an anomaly. His powers are not exactly cut and dry to us because he kind of can do whatever the fuck he wants. And I don't think that Nesta would be far off from that once she learns how to master things. I do think the next few ACOTAR books will be Nesta learning and mastering more and more of that power. Because at the end of this book, she says her powers are gone, and let's just say I don't buy it.
After Rhys's power was able to wash over Nesta's silver flames, she fell fully back asleep. And when she wakes up, we get a glimpse into her POV from last night's terror. There was no escaping the nightmare that felt both real and not real until Cassian's voice said her name. And then Rhys's voice and power eased her out of the dark pit of her dream back into a peaceful slumber. Cassian is sleeping in a chair beside her bed, wearing only his undershorts. I can totally visualize that. Not in a sexual way, but just like in a sweet way. And he's got a blanket like someone probably as draped over him. It's just so cute. The sight of him watching over her, quote, like a knight guarding his lady and reminding her of her childhood books makes Nesta very emotional. Here is someone who deeply cares for her, protects her at all costs, and is so worried about her. Seeing him sleeping beside her, unwilling to leave her side, is something that Nesta never imagined for herself.
On that note, the knight guarding his lady language, while it's not the word queen exactly, in this world, lady, aka high lady, they're very similar with queen. So I am actually going to count this towards our queen count.
Really?
Or not. Never mind.
No, you're being very generous with your queen counts.
The reason I am going to be counting this here is because of the knight guarding his lady language, because it's not just, oh, my lady. It's a knight guarding his lady. So it automatically puts her on that higher pedestal. I am going to count this, Lexi, and that brings our count to 17. But this also might possibly be foreshadowing for their future. If Nesta does become high lady of the new resurrected Dusk Court, for example, Cassian could be that warrior warrior prince, that knight for her.
We have to remember that Nesta was groomed as a child to marry for conquest. Love was never part of the equation, and she has felt so unworthy of love and care for so long. She was never even taught to value it. Yet here is her warrior right beside her no matter what. This moment reveals to Nesta not just how much Cassian truly does care for her, but how much it means to her and how touched she is by this, how much she has needed this and didn't even realize it. It's like she already knew that Cassian was like that, but now it's really dawning on her how much it matters to her as well. I love their little exchange here, how when Cassian wakes up with eyes full of worry and his unrelenting goodness, and he asks her if she wants to talk about, the night before. She says no, and he's like, okay, that's fine. Quote, and that was that. He knows that she'll open up when and if she's ready. Just a few chapters ago, he thought the same thing about Azriel. Simply being there for her is what matters, and they both know it, and that's all that's needed to convey the depth of care and understanding and support.
Later that day, Cassian goes to see Rhys, who's looking, according to Cassian, like hell. Well, it turns out that yesterday, prior to Nesta's nightmare, Rhys and Feyre went to go see Maja for a little baby checkup. And through her magical ultrasound, she informed the couple that the baby has wings, which is really, really fucking bad. The baby's wings are bony and therefore not pliable during labor. And Illyrian females are the only ones who have pelvises for those bony Illyrian wings. But the baby is only quarter Illyrian, and even his father can vanish his wings on and off. How is this possible? Well, when Rhys and Feyre were doing the deed, Feyre role-played and shape-shifted into an Illyrian form, which doesn't only give her the wings, but it transforms every part of her, including the most intrinsic parts of her body, which, in my opinion, doesn't really add up to what we know about Feyre's shape-shifting powers, because when she shape-shifted her eyes to be able to see in the dark, she didn't become an owl or some kind of like alley cat. So this is a cauldron boil me moment. So basically, Feyre had full Illyrian eggs when she and Rhys did the deed, and Rhys gave her his swimmers. Then Feyre shifted back, but the egg had already fertilized as an Illyrian. So why doesn't Feyre just shift back for the birth? Because it might put the baby at risk. In fact, she can't do any shape-shifting or unique magic using her gifts until after the birth. But she can winnow. She can fully dematerialize and rematerialize somewhere else. That's totally fine.
I think that's more, I'll call it common magic.
Yes.
I know that it's only for the stronger Fae, but it is more common. And so that's like, okay, we understand exactly how this magic works.
Yes.
That is totally fine when people are pregnant. However, because Feyre got the shape-shifting ability from another High Lord, whose name we do not speak of, or any of her other powers, that is where they're like, we don't know how this works. So we have to be very, very cautious.
I completely agree. It is just very funny to me that it's like, you cannot shapeshift even your hair color, but you can fully dematerialize and the baby's fine. It makes sense within the world, but then my brain also goes, huh? But
well, if we're also talking about that, I mean, if she and the baby, you're most likely going to die no matter what.
I'm getting to it. I am getting to it. Hold on. Because I 100% get not wanting to put the baby's growth at risk or the baby at risk during labor. But Feyre is currently at risk, all caps, neon, italicized, everything, which means Nyx and therefore Rhys are also at risk. So we can't do the thing that might hurt the baby, but we will continue doing the thing that will most likely kill them all. Maybe this is why I would be a terrible doctor, but this like infuriates me. But also infuriates me is because Feyre doesn't know this. She only knows that there's going to be an elevated risk at birth. Rhys is the only one who knows, and now Cassian and Azriel as well, and has forbidden anyone in the inner circle to tell Feyre of her fate.
Before we dive deeper into the complexities of the situation, let's take a second to shine the spotlight on Miracle Maid. There's no better feeling than cozying up into bed at the end of a long day, and Miracle Maid makes curling up with your sheets even more wonderful.
These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresher 3 times longer than other sheets. Using silver-infused fabrics inspired by NASA, Miracle Maid sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, no matter the weather. So you get better sleep every single night.
Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands and feel as nice, if not nicer, than sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Snuggling up in bed with my luxury feeling Miracle Maid sheets is my favorite part of every single day, and they really do help me stay comfy, whatever the temperature, throughout the entire night.
Go to trymiracle.com/FF to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, you can order today and save over 40%. And if you use our promo code FF at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-backed guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you will get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/FF and use code FF to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that is trymiracle.com/FF to treat yourself. Thank you so much, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode.
Okay, it's time to talk about the fandom's big grievance with this book. Why Rhys does not tell Feyre, and how he instructs the rest of the Inner Circle not to tell her either about the fatal dangers of this pregnancy. As a whole, it really rubs readers the wrong way how Rhys keeps this very important bit of information secret from his mate. This is Feyre's body and her life, and she absolutely has a right to know the full scope of what's going on. We were right there with them as their love story blossomed and got to see how close they are, how much they trust one another. And yes, Rhys breaks Feyre's trust in the situation because he hides the true consequences of their baby having wings from her. There is no excuse to do that as a partner who the other trusts with their entire soul. I'll also agree with many readers that he should have known better when they were trying to conceive and made Feyre aware that if they had sex while she was in her Illyrian form, it could pose some dangers. And looking at it from his perspective, I can see how he did not think that far ahead. I'm not trying to make excuses here. I'm just trying to look at this from his perspective. First of all, I assume they did not know that Feyre wouldn't be able to wield her powers while pregnant because the healer informed them this is a unique situation. Conceiving is also very rare for the Fae, so some of their sexy times with her having her own wings probably never crossed their mind that this time would be the time. But yes, no matter what, that was not looking long-term at the consequences of wing play. So like we do, let's look at this from Rhys's perspective and how he handles this lose-lose situation. Because while this is a really tough look, I can understand why Rhys did not tell her. First of all, Rhys is not thinking clearly at all. Cassian instantly notes how his brother is on the verge of completely losing it. He is lost in anticipatory grief, unable to do anything about his mate and unborn child dying. And yes, him too, although we know he's too selfless for that to be his focus. Second, being pregnant is scary no matter what. You are always fearful for the baby's well-being and want to do everything in your power to protect the little one inside you. As mothers, we feel it is our responsibility that we create a nurturing environment for the baby to grow and come into this world safely. And this is something out of Feyre and anyone else's control. So telling her this early in the pregnancy, you and the baby are probably going to die, which also means Rhys too, that could mentally and emotionally destroy her. Yet here she'd still have to grow the baby within her and wait for that fatal labor. Yes, I will say again that she has every right to know this information, and she should. And I can see how Rhys is trying to protect her well-being by not telling her that they're all going to die and there's nothing anyone can do about it. Third, Rhys is determined to find a solution before he shares the truth with Feyre. He's desperate to use any and all resources available in the world, and if there is a way to help her, he is on a mission to find it. So when it is time to tell her about the complications, he prefers to have a solution to the fatal problem versus telling his mate she, their baby, and him have a death sentence. Fourth and lastly, eventually after he has exhausted all options, talk to everyone he possibly can that can help. It's like the secret has been hidden from her for so long that it's built up even more, and he has no idea how to tell her this after knowing for months and months. He won't be able to bring himself to tell her even as the time gets closer and she needs to know the complications that she's going to face. While this might seem selfish of Rhys, from his perspective, he is coming from a place of self-sacrifice. In this way, he is sacrificing his own happiness so that his mate can still look forward to the future, still smile and be happy and hopeful, and he'll be the one to shoulder this burden. And yes, we've pointed out throughout the series how Rhys does keep secrets from those he loves. This is not entirely out of character for him, as much as it feels like it is because it's with Feyre and the biggest secret of all. So yeah, all of this to say, it's hard to rip into Rhys as he navigates this lose-lose situation the best he can. Should he have told his mate about her future, especially after he turns up every stone and there ultimately is no solution? Yes, absolutely. And I also get why he doesn't. It's from a place of panic, uncertainty, terror, sacrifice, anticipatory grief, and protection. Not an excuse, but an understanding.
And again, I want to point out that we are looking at this from Rhysand's perspective. And looking at this from Rhysand's perspective, like you said, this is a lose-lose situation. And it's moments like this that make these types of books really hard to deep dive, but also real life. These characters are not black and white. Even when we were deep diving like instances with Tamlin, we were always driven to look at things from his point of view, even if we wildly did not agree with them. And I absolutely think that that is very similar here with Rhys and what choice he makes. When I think about why this rubs me in the wrong way, it's not because I don't understand why he made this decision, because I do. And you make really great points. And thank you for laying that out so beautifully. For me, it comes back to that word that we have talked about endlessly on the podcast, and that is choice. When it comes to Feyre and Rhys, specifically Rhys's interactions with Feyre, choice has been at the forefront of everything. One of the things that he absolutely despised Tamlin for was Tamlin took Feyre's choice over her life, her future, her dresses even. He took all of those choices away. And Rhys was like, I'm giving you full autonomy over your life. And here it feels like, whoa, where did that go? So the reason that my Irken gets really nerked in this thing is not because I don't see where he's coming from. It's because the choice that has been so important to him suddenly goes out the window. And that's what feels out of character.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. It is hard because in this instance, it's like she either knows or she doesn't know.
Yeah.
And so choice is not so black and white even in and of itself here either. But I absolutely do agree with you. It feels like that is missing from this equation. And that's where it's like, whoa, Rhys, who are you now?
Yes.
And again, I understand he's not thinking clearly. Again, all the points that I laid out there. And this goes on for months.
Yes.
Yep.
Really quickly, before people are warming up their fingers and getting ready to type some comments, we want to bring up what we say at the top of every Silver Flames episode. And that is, while we recognize that this is a very divisive book among the fandom, and this is one of the many reasons why, it is okay for this community to have differing beliefs. It's okay if you really strongly disagree with Lexi and I here. And please, please, please be respectful, not only to us, but other people as the conversation continues on other channels. With Rhys being very lost in his own fear, like Lexi was saying, Asriel, who is thinking much clearer than Rhys, brings it upon himself to make Rhys look bigger picture and look at the possible negative outcomes from others finding out about Feyre's pregnancy. Like that Timmy Tam. And I'm not going to lie, when I first read this, I agreed with Rhys full stop. Like, what the fuck do I have to care about Tamlin right now? However, as continues, they need the Spring Court forces if another war is about to break out. Spring is already in a very precarious state. Baron right now is playing Monopoly, and he's about 2 seconds away from taking the Spring Court land for himself. So if Tamlin goes on a full Tim Tam rage, which we all know he is more than capable of, what it could look like is very possibly him doing something stupid, like abandoning all semblance of control that he has over the Spring Court. Whatever is left of that. Or it could also
say there's some left.
There's very little, but I mean, technically he's still, I'm going to call it, owns the Spring Court right now. He could also go side with Baron. Remember, he made a deal with Hybern, spy or no. So I don't think that's entirely off the table. Or what Rhys and Asriel are thinking is that he could go rage, destroy, or go march on the Night Court and lose terribly. Let's just say that. So they need to summon Lucian and have him stationed at the Spring Court so that he would be able to contain any possible damage. He would be able to convince Tamlin maybe not to attack the Night Court. And he would also be the eyes and ears of the Inner Circle, which, plus, I want to mention, that's Lucian going spy, basically, and not staying as Tamlin's confidant. I do also wonder if Asriel is hopeful that maybe Lucian will be part of the reprimand in Tamlin's anger, or he'll be taken off the table in some way. It's not out of the
doesn't
question.
want him in Valaris.
Listen, it's not out of the question for Asriel to be like, here's a great way to take Lucian off the table. Once Asriel's reasoning sinks into Rhys, the anger has, I won't say left the High Lord, but it's much more manageable. And in its wake is only a grumbled quote. The idea of coddling Tamlin makes me want to shatter that window. Honestly fair.
Later in chapter 58, Lucian briefly summarizes how the reveal goes with Tamlin when Nesta asks how the Spring Court is doing. Quote, how you'd expect. So not well at all, huh? Which, yeah, we discussed at length Tamlin's deterioration and depression in Frost and Starlight, so I won't bring it up here until we have to. But I think we can all imagine exactly what, quote, how you'd expect to go with Tamlin learning of his ex's pregnancy and continued happily ever after with her mate and now growing family. Which is bad for Prythian. They need the Spring Court forces in case another war breaks out. And if Tamlin is a complete mess, even more so than he already is before finding out about the pregnancy, which is really saying something since he's already in his beast form roaming the lands and not ruling, that is bad for Prythian and creates even more of an opening for Baron to take his territory.
That night, in the dining room, Cassian stumbles in, bruised and beat up from sparring with Rhys, because his brother really needed to get some of that fearful, anxious energy out.
As beaten up as he is, this certainly isn't the first time these two have taken to sparring to get energy out. Like in ACOSF when Rhys was a horn dog, Cassian taunted him and it led to an hour-long fight. And I'm pretty sure it's happened multiple other times over the years. Cassian knows what his brother needs in the moment, just like they all sometimes need. This is one of the best ways Cassian can support his brother and let him know he's here for him.
And Cassian doesn't hold back the reasoning for their brawling to Nesta, telling her that the baby will indeed have wings and it will most likely kill Feyre or render her unable to have children again. First off, I love that Cassian didn't think twice before telling Nesta. I'm not comparing it to Rhys not telling Feyre or anything because it's very different situations. But the reason I love it is because while Cassian and Nesta maybe don't have the greatest communication all the time, this really puts in the forefront of how much Cassian does value honesty with a partner, which I'm really surprised that Rhys, A, knows that he told her, but most importantly, that he's cool with it as long as she keeps quiet, which, whoops.
It definitely gives, I won't tell anyone, but my partner doesn't count vibes.
Oh, absolutely. Secondly, as you can imagine, this news of her sister's future really freaks Nesta out. Quote, for a heartbeat, every bit of spite, of anger, of bitterness faded away. Pure, clear panic replaced it. I love that clear panic, especially what mental clarity has been for Nesta throughout this book. Nesta and Feyre have their issues. Yes, they do, and they have to work through them. And at the end of the day, they are sisters who love and care for each other.
Hearing that Feyre will probably die from delivering the baby, Nesta says quietly that she'll try scrying again, which is a bit of a record scratch moment for Cassian after what happened last night as a result of scrying. The first time Nesta scryed and then the Cauldron took Elaine, she never wanted to do it again because of the risk. But even after terribly painful consequences to herself after the second time, she is willing to try again. Why so willing, especially on the heels of last night's horrors? Quote, if that babe survived, Nesta would not allow him to be born into a world once more plunged into war. This goes back to what Nicole said last episode about Nesta willing to try to track down the trove after Feyre announced her pregnancy. She wants to be brave for her nephew, and she wants to be brave for her sister. The baby having wings and the consequences are out of their control as much as they're trying to find a solution. But this is something that is within Nesta's control. She doesn't want to be a coward. If that baby survives, he deserves to come into a world of peace and safety. He and Feyre deserve that more than anything after what they're about to endure. And Nesta can majorly contribute to that future. So for them, for any hope of a future for them, for gaining a little bit of control back, she'll attempt scrying again. Under one condition, says Cassian, Rhys and Amren need to be there. Understandably so. They are messing with powers bigger than the two of them can comprehend. They need safety nets this time around to try and make it successful and to protect Nesta.
Conversation shifts. Just like Rhys needed to fight out his fear, there's a part of Cassian that needs to flirt out his own, which Nesta immediately meets him with this game of distraction, a game that she knows very, very well. One thing is for certain, though, for this sexual tension, Cassian wants more. Damn it. After confirming that he didn't hurt her when they were last sexually charged in the dining room, which is so sweet and also such a flex, my guy. I love that. He admits that he wants to fuck her anywhere, the table, the chair, every surface of this house. Now? Is now a good time, Nesta? No, not wanting to bed him while he looks like a piece of pummeled meat, which we get this iconic line from Cassian, quote, we can dim the lights. He's like, but now, we can do this now. She instead gets the last word, wanting him to be her reward post-scrying. Quote, when you're healed and looking pretty again, I'll let you fuck me wherever you please in this house. While it won't be in the house at first, that house will become their personal sex room. Poor Asriel.
Because these two are still playing their game, even if it's evolved from competition with each other to flirtation, I'm going to give a point here. And it goes to Nesta. Cassian 11, Nesta 10. Whoo, she's catching up with you, Cassian.
Oh man, Cassian is making moves with Nesta, and throughout life, we have to make slightly less sexy moves of our own. I am talking about, of course, money moves. And with the Chime Secured Credit Builder Visa credit card, you can use everyday purchases to work toward bigger things. Start building credit with everyday purchases and regular on-time payments, all with no annual fees, interest, or credit check with Chime.
Having a strong credit score is so important to you as you adult through life. So many of us have that dream of buying a home one day. Well, with a strong credit score, that opens up all kinds of new possibilities, like getting lower rates on your home loan. The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card helps make that dream a reality by building credit using your own money. And you can use it anywhere Visa credit cards are accepted.
Chime also gives you access to over 50,000 fee-free ATMs. That's more than the top 3 national banks combined. All you have to do is hop on the Chime app and you'll be able to find the closest one near you.
Turn everyday purchases into steps toward your financial goals with Chime's secure credit card. Get started today at chime.com/fantasyfangirl. That's chime.com/fantasyfangirl. Chime feels like progress.
The Chime Credit Builder Visa credit card is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. or Stride Bank N.A. Spot me eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Out-of-network ATM withdrawal and OTC advance fees may apply. Terms and conditions apply. Go to chime.com/disclosures for details. The next morning, Cassian and Nesta meet up with Rhys, Feyre, Asriel, and Amren in the study of the River House, containing a giant map of the realms, Lexi's dream. Nesta walks in and feels the weight of their stares and feeling like they're judging her. But we do see some real growth from Nesta. As she walks in, she offers Feyre a small nod of greeting, which I could also see is because she knows her sisterly time is now possibly numbered. We also see a shift in wording. Not once does Nesta call Rhys Rhysand. In her inner monologue, she starts calling Rhys, unlike Rhysand, as she was doing in the previous chapters, showing that maybe after the other night, there's a little teeny tiny more warmth there. But there's no time to lollygag, much like Cassian wants to lollygag. We've got some scrying to do.
The Inner Circle assures Nesta that Elaine is protected. All eyes are on Elaine, and Rhys put protective wards around her. As Asriel says, they won't make the same mistake twice. Elaine is as safe as can be. This puts Nesta at most ease she can be in the situation, and thus the scrying begins. She focuses on Cassian's warm presence and feels comfort in his protection, drawing back to her assurance of his genuine intentions when she found him sleeping next to her bedside, guarding her from harm all night.
I love that this time as she falls into scrying, she thinks of safety. She says, quote, no harm, no harm, no harm. Versus last time, she only thought of things that she feared, she hated, she regretted. As she falls into the scrying, Nesta thinks, quote, in the beginning and in the end, there is darkness and nothing more. It's calling back to that beginning prologue of the book when she was in the cauldron and taking from it. I also think it's to show that she's now tapping back into that cauldron's vast magic. We will also hear this saying again when Nesta plucks the 26th string at the end of this book, but I will be discussing that later.
Instead of calling for the trove into the void like the previous scrying, this time she eases into the darkness as if slowly submerging herself in a pool. I love that visualization we get there. She's meeting the darkness where it's at and feels grounded by Cassian's presence, knowing that he is her anchor back to home. Which, pause, that is such a key word. Cassian is her home, just like Rhys was Feyre's home when she was in limbo. I love how mates are always home. Nesta starts to get lost in the scrying. Her eyelids are shifting. Her fingers are tight on the stones and bones hovering over the map, and the air is growing cold as she taps into her power and the cauldron's dark void. Feyre and Rhys are unable to enter her mind like she did back in ACOWAR because Nesta's shields are a fortress of solid iron. It's not quite Nesta inadvertently putting her mental shields up, but rather it's the essence of the cauldron preventing anyone else from entering like they've done before. As the situation escalates and our crew is like, okay, we need to get Nesta out now, she can't stay connected to the cauldron this long, or she'll probably become lost to her power, too far gone to come back, or get too close to that raw source of the cauldron, and it'll once again lead to dangerous consequences. Nesta is consumed by her power in this moment, silver fire burning within her eyes, but she's still holding onto her tether to this world, Cassian. I love how he sends a bite of his power to her as his way of letting her know he's right here and unafraid. Quote, but death had walked beside him every day of his life. This right here is one more reason why Nesta and Cassian are such a good match. He doesn't cower at her power of death like everyone else, but rather embraces it and meets it head on, which she needs so badly, especially when she herself is so scared of her own power. It calls back to the theory that his mate is actually death. I wholeheartedly believe his mate is Nesta, even if he doesn't say he loves her in this whole book, because he wondered about the mating bond back when she was human. But I believe this is one of the reasons fate made them mates, because she would become Lady Death and he her soulmate. I also wonder if the cold in the room and power of death intertwined with Nesta is because she is specifically looking for the mask in this moment. Would the room maybe not have gone so cold if she searched for, say, the harp, and the power of the mask amplified this response while scrying? Not sure, because Nesta's power is so closely tied to death and cold anyway, but it's a thought because the mask is a representative of death as well. To bring her back, Cassian taps into their intimacy and connection, their playfulness and their arousal with each other, their sexual fire to combat her getting lost in her power. And then he kisses her in front of everybody, which I love how Farrah is gaping. Like, that definitely tracks for her character.
Feyre's like, I knew it!
Nesta may not kiss him back, but he is determined to bring her back to him in this kiss, thawing out the cold, bringing warmth and humanity back to her. And phew! It works. She comes back into herself and lets go of the stones and bones.
Because the bones and stones end up falling somewhere on the map, the Bog of Oorid, a place filled with so much evil that no one wants to venture there. Only the worst of the worst fairies are drawn to it. So the plan is simple. Go to this worst of the worst fairies bog and get the item of the dread trove. When? Tomorrow. ASAP, before fear is able to grab hold of Nesta and before she learns what horrors she's about to be facing.
The following day, Azriel, Cassian, and Nesta travel to the bog, which is today's Suriel Teatime, so I'll save most of the details for that. But bottom line, like Nicole said, this place is evil. It is death and decay, and simply being here feels wrong. Cassian even thinks that out of all the horrible places he's been in this world, the bog is by far the worst. Can we just imagine for a moment where he's probably been, especially with who he sent to the prison? That's really saying something. Even Azriel flinches being here. And Cassian is trying to act all cool, calm, and collected, but he isn't, sugarcoating this place whatsoever. Oh, and important bit of advice, stay the hell out of the water. You hear that, Nesta? Stay out of the water. Let's hope the mask also is not in the water. Spoiler alert. It is. So here's the plan now that they're in the bog. They'll fly over the bog as Nesta attempts to use her spidey senses to seek out the mask's precise location. And if they have no luck today, because it is a vast place to cover, then they'll try it again tomorrow.
As Cassian and Nesta fly, quote, no wind moved around them, not even a breeze. Since wind is such a huge, I'll call it communication tool in this world, especially for our Death Lords, Amryn and Meryl, I wonder if this is a show don't tell for us about what that wild magic was. It was so wild that it was overpowering wind communication. I don't know, it feels tied. While flying over the bog, Cassian and Nesta talk about the different monsters that are rumored to live in this part of the middle, like kelpies or witches who were at first something else entirely and then thirsted for magic, so much so that it turned them into these wretched creatures, and light singers, lovely ethereal beings who lure you in, appearing friendly when you are lost, and then when you're in their arms, they drown you in the bog. They kill for sport, not food or survival. But hey, Light Singer sounds a lot like the opposite of Shadow Singer, which this is as good a time as any to discuss the very, very popular theory that Gwyneth Berdara is a light singer. There are multiple instances of Gwen having light abilities, and for this theory, I am pulling from a Tumblr article by Silver Lined Eyes. From, quote, Gwen's hair seemed to glow brighter with her song, skin radiating a beckoning light, drawing any listener in. That sounds very siren talk, right? And then later, when Gwen's voice rises, the notes are described as, quote, pure light, piercing and summoning. And then that's when Nesta unknowingly scries, quote, something beckoned in Gwen's song in a way that others hadn't, like Gwen was calling only to her, her voice full of sunshine and joy and unshakable determination. The reason I'm pulling that really is because if Gwen is this light singer, and I'll get way more into the theory in a second, that means that she is a summoner. She pulls people in, she draws them in, and here's Nesta literally falling into that. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not bring up Asriel's bonus chapter from A Court of Silver Flames when he finds Gwyn in the training ring at 2 a.m. After teaching her how to correct a mistake with her sword, he turns to leave. Quote, he could have sworn a faint, beautiful singing followed him, which causes his shadows to peek up in answer, almost as if recognizing a kin, perhaps. And also Gwyn asks if he sings, which would be so poetic if they are both singers, especially in that opposition. So all of this to say, you're probably like, Nicole, light singers are evil the way that Cassian's talking about them. I don't believe that Gwyn is evil. In fact, I think that she would only be part light singer, and I actually don't even think she knows it. I also believe that it was Gwen's grandmother who was full light singer, especially considering that this grandmother seduced an Autumn Court male, and that's how Gwen's mother came to be. And so I think that Gwen's mother told her and Katrin that her grandmother was water nymph because of the stigma and the danger around light singers. Since light singers do dwell in the Bog of Oorid, I wonder if they also have that webbed fingers like Katrin had. And also since they're shapeshifters, I wonder if that's why Gwen has such pliant bones.
I absolutely love this theory. Do I think that it plays a larger role in the story, and if it is true, doesn't matter, or is this just some really fun fan speculation? I am leaning toward that more, certainly. However, I do love the idea of her being that like light singer and representing these bad light singers in a positive manner. Like you were saying, we don't think that she's evil by any means, but she is representing this lightness, this pulling in, this beautiful singing and things like that. So I do see that. And I also don't want it to disregard her and her beautiful essence in and of herself. Gwen, one of the most wonderful things about her is how soft and light and approachable she is, how her song really does draw people in because it is so beautiful and that comfort. And so as much as I do love this theory, do I believe that it is definitely true? Not necessarily. I think that this is definitely more just speaking to Gwen's character, but the parallels are so much fun. And it's one of those really fun fan theories. It's not a fun theory, but is a fun fan theory.
Here's how I think it would play out is with Asriel. If her and Asriel are both these opposition singers in some way, where Asriel's almost going to represent the I'll say more morally good side of shadow singers, and Gwen represents the more morally good side of light singers, maybe that's a way for them to come together and really embrace their powers together and have that almost like yin and yang style to it. I could also see this being a huge mates hint with the two of them if they're both singers in some way in this way. The do you sing part of Asriel's bonus chapter really stood out to me, especially connecting them together if it is on this deeper level. It's something I'm going to keep an eye out. Like, am I fully convinced? I'm leaning there. I'm getting there, but I'm not like 100%. I'd say I'm like at a solid 92.3. But I'm going to keep an eye out for it, especially in the rest of this deep dive, because I really love this idea, especially knowing that we think that Gwen's lineage is definitely a mystery that is going to be solved. And I think that this would be a cool element to it.
I think also it would open up more possibilities of what light singers are capable of. There is the evil kind that is found in the middle, and then there is the more good kind when you're talking about these singers, and that really being that yin and yang with the shadow singer there. So I guess I could see it. I need to be a little bit more convinced though.
Fair.
Right as Nesta thinks that she sensed something as they're flying over the Bog of Oorid, Cassian looks over his shoulder to signal to Az that they should land and check it out. But Az isn't there. Swooping into the mist, they can spot Asriel's blue siphons flaring below. It looks like he's on the ground and fighting something. Or someone. Multiple someones. Asriel is battling 24 Autumn Court soldiers. Seems like one of them shot an ash arrow at Asriel's wing, causing him to have to land, and now he's locked in a fight with them. The ash arrow renders Az's magic practically useless, so instead of incinerating all of the soldiers with his siphons, his magic is only a flicker as a signal for Cassian to come and help.
Can people stop shooting Asriel with ash arrows, please? This is like the fourth time.
I don't even know. We've lost count.
Oh my God.
We'll soon enough learn that these are the same Autumn Court soldiers that went missing after they returned from the continent when Baron met with Brialyn. And Eris has no idea they're here, despite Cassian understandably wondering if he fucked them over right now.
Cassian spots an area he deems safe enough to leave Nesta before going to help his brother.
That line where he's like, quote, "I know what each second costs me, Nesta." It's so painful. He knows he's leaving his brother on his own, but he needs to ensure Nesta is safe first, and it's tearing him apart.
I also love that she says Cassian, and then he responds back with saying her name with Nesta. It's just like that just shows that they're getting much more comfortable using that level of intimacy, which for them is pretty intense. So Cassian drops her off in a solid stretch of grassy land with only the remnants of a tree to put her in, and where she shall remain like a koala bear. He gives her only one order: Nesta, do not climb down, no matter what you may see or hear.
Immediately after, Cassian swoops into Azriel's battle with the 24 soldiers and kills and kills and kills. But don't worry, they'll leave 2 alive to interrogate later. These soldiers will be compared to rabid dogs. No thought or strategy, just a desire to kill. Which, yep, makes sense because we'll find out that they are under the crown's influence. And it's important to note that this is only 24 out of the 36 that Briallen has. The other dozen soldiers will come into play at the prison, and they'll be the ones to capture Eris at the end of the book.
But about 30 minutes go by, and Nesta's limbs are shaking. Her mind is whirring, and so she begins to climb down. Which, pause. 30 minutes. Imagine hanging in a tree like a koala bear for 30 minutes. My limbs would be dying too. But more so than her limbs absolutely killing her is her mind spinning and anxiety racing. She has no ability to know what was happening. No sound, no flash of lights, because the bog eats up anything around her that might tell her that information. Quote, every breath echoed her thoughts. Every breath was gobbled up by the Oorid's oppression. And of course, like many of us when we're anxious, we start stacking any bad or anxious moments one on top of the other. I think about when you leave the house and you're like, did I leave the oven on? And then you like start stacking up. Did I even lock the door? Did I even do this? It's like all these different things, but imagine that with your mate and not an oven. Nesta immediately.
Good analogy, Nicole.
Nesta starts remembering when she saw Cassian gravely injured in Highburn at the end of ACOSF, when she was seeing him crawl towards her as she goes into the cauldron, or when he was gutted and Azriel literally had to hold his intestines in, or when they battled Highburn together and Cassian was on death's door. Her mind spins and spins, remembering every instance that she's seen him hurt, imagining him in that exact state now. After 30 minutes, I would be panicking. Nesta also just recently had her "I'm not going to be a coward while other people around me are brave" moment. So she has another wave of that here. However, there's only one problem, because down on the ground, there's only one way towards where she believes Cassian and Azriel to be fighting. Nesta would have to wade through the inky black water, which, remember, don't go in the water, Nesta, which stretches on for miles around her. Her hesitation is not for a lack of knowledge of how to swim, though. Her mother made sure she knew how. Which, side note, remember Fae were telling Tamlin in Akatar in the Pool of Starlight that she taught herself how to swim. This is just one more instance where their mother solely ignored Feyre's education. But Mama Archeron taught Nesta, and I'm assuming probably Elaine too, to swim because she had a cousin who drowned in childhood by fairies dragging her into the river, which again is another tie to how Mama Archeron really knows more than she's letting on about the Fae. I'm assuming also that this happened on the continent, since Erstin, her cousin, is also on the continent.
I'm pretty positive her mother grew up here in the mortal realm south of Prythian, because Nesta's grandmother and her mother's mother was also here in her old age. And her mother married the Prince of Merchants, which I feel is top of the wealthy chain in this mortal realm, but it would be more mid-level on the continent. So her mother wouldn't have left the continent to go marry the Prince of Merchants, but rather she'd already be here and marry as high up as she could. I think that this other cousin moved to the continent versus them living in the continent originally and moving here to the mortal realm in Prythian.
Interesting, because I don't know why I assumed that this cousin was like Erstin's sister or something, and Erstin and this cousin were both on the continent together, because I could see that this cousin who died in the river was actually a victim of Kostjay, or at least someone working on behalf of Kostjay, since he can't leave his lake. Because Kostjay takes women, he traps them in the watery depths himself.
I like that idea. His lake is deep in an ancient forest. So I don't think well-to-do children would find themselves playing there if they were indeed on the continent, which, again, I don't think they were. We were speculating last episode that this cousin who drowned is a sibling of Erstin, but that's pure speculation that we have. And again, I don't think that they moved from the continent to here. I think they moved from here to the continent. And this one cousin did that.
Interesting. We can agree to disagree on that. I like thinking that they're all connected, even through my fun theories. Nesta really and truly begins to panic now, and a voice in her head tells her to run, run, run. This voice is female, soft and gentle, wise and serene, and Nesta wonders if it was her human instincts, ... or something more. Later, when Nesta plucks the 26th string and it turns out that it is time itself, we get again that in the beginning and in the end, there was darkness and nothing more. But that time, again, at the end of this book, it is said in that same familiar female voice. So I have a crack theory. We have wondered at length in ACOTAR if the Archerons are descendants from that, quote, clever Fae warrior that the bone carver talked about. Could this voice be that clever Fae warrior or someone maybe related to her?
I'm 99.9% sure it's the mother. And that is through Nesta's connection with the Cauldron. And she also has the connection with the mother. That's whose voice we hear both times. Like, I'm almost positive we get confirmation of that at the end of the book.
Oh, I love that. I love that a lot. Nesta is freaking out through all of this. And you know what would really help Nesta? Ritual. Start your morning off with Ritual's Stress Relief, which uses first-of-its-kind technology to support the body's natural cortisol response, which Nesta has in abundance right now, so you can take on the daily juggle. I know for me, it always feels like life can get more busy, more complicated, and it can be really hard for me to center myself and calm a lot of that inner stress that I have. But with Ritual, I feel like I have a tool to help ease that anxiety and stress in a healthy manner.
I love making Ritual a part of my daily routine. It gives me so much peace of mind knowing that I'm starting my day off doing something for me. Plus, when I take my daily Ritual, I know that they use ingredients that have been clinically studied to promote stress relief and a positive mood. It's so important to start my day off right. And with Ritual, I know I'm helping myself put my best foot forward.
There's so much in our lives that we can't control, and we know the juggle is real. Don't just respond to stress, get ahead of it with stress relief from Ritual. Get 25% off your first month at ritual.com/FFG. Start Ritual or add stress relief to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/FFG for 25% off. As Nesta looks back into the water, there's a pair of night dark eyes looking back at her.
Ooh. And we meet the absolutely terrifying Kelpie. It's a male humanoid with enormous black eyes, black hair, cheekbones so sharp they could slice air, and a way too large mouth. It inches out of the black water in stiff, jolting movements with long fingers cracking and popping. This is 10 times more terrifying than the ring girl coming out of the TV, which also absolutely scarred me as a kid. Stay tuned for lots more about the Kelpie in today's Suriel.
This is definitely not the deceiving white beautiful horse or pretty young-faced man that Cassian warned her not to run after, which, by the way, if you, like me, were puzzled by this statement from Cassian, allow me to take us on a journey to Scottish folklore, because Kelpies in Scottish folklore are shapeshifters that can appear on land as a gray or white horse or as a human form that will entice people to go and follow them into a watery grave. Cute! Lexi, have you ever looked up fan art of the ACOTAR Kelpie?
Unfortunately, I have.
Listeners, don't. Just don't do it. It's so scary. The Kelpie looks at her frozen on the ground and starts speaking to her in a language she doesn't know, which, really quick side note, I was listening to the graphic audio this morning in prep for today's episode, and the Kelpie on the graphic audio, like, I love the graphic audio of Silver Flames, and the Kelpie sounds like, and I was like, this sounds like a SpongeBob episode.
I was gonna say, that sounds like the where they're whispering into the bubbles. And then Squidward intercepts it. Oh my God.
Yes, it sounds just like that. Oh my God.
I knew there hadn't been a SpongeBob reference in here yet.
You know my mind so well, big sister. I love it. Later, when Nesta allows Rhys and Amren to look into her mind and see what the Kelpie says to her, they will recognize that this is the language of the ancient Fae, a language that has not been spoken on Prythian in 15,000 years. How interesting. More on that later. But we learn from Amren that the Kelpie told her, quote, "Are you my sacrifice, sweet flesh? How pale and young you are. Tell me, are they resuming the sacrifices to the waters once more? No gods can save you. I shall take you, little beauty. I shall make you my bride before you are my supper."
Ooh. Instead of listening to the voice in her head urging her to run, Nesta is frozen on the spot, which hurts my heart. She has been training to draw upon this inner strength and not be weak in these dangerous situations. But this is some really scary shit. I totally get you, Nesta. And she's rooted, her legs too numb to move, not even remembering how to scream. This moment makes her iconic breakthrough at the end of this episode all the more meaningful. Never again.
So the Kelpie takes Nesta down through the inky waters, claws slicing through her skin just before ancient spears and weapons from the bog's watery floor cut into her even more. But Nesta is a person who needs air to survive, and the Kelpie knows it. So slamming her to the bottom of the bog, he puts his lips and many layers of teeth on her mouth and kisses her. Quote, his black tongue shoved into her mouth, tasting of foul meat. Gross.
Oh my God, this makes me gag every time I read it. So gross.
I was working on this part of the outline in bed, and Brett looks over and he was like, oh my God. This is his way of breathing air into her lungs so she can, not drown. The second time he does this, this just gives me his hands run down her body and he laughs into her lips, recalling her memory of moments in her life where she felt helpless like this. Fucking hate you, Kelpie.
This is just like the Cauldron getting dragged into the icy dark, just like Thomas, who thought she was his to claim. Nesta pushes back on her initial terror that there is nothing she can do, realizing she has weapons, a dagger to fight against the Kelpie. Nope, the Kelpie disarms her.
And when all hope seems lost, she begins to beg from that power within. Please, please.
But it's not the power within Nesta that answers. Quote, she could see it glowing ahead, golden and shining. It feels like it's her power outside of her, moving closer and closer to her while the Kelpie drags her through the water. And yes, it is her power, and it's the mask. Never forget, like calls to like.
Which, yes, we do get a like calls to like mention, which brings our count for the whole series to 10. For now, we're adding to that quite a bit later this episode.
When Nesta begged for the power within her, slumbering and ancient and terrible, to rise up and help her, the mask answered. Because the mask is made from the Cauldron too, imbued with the same power that is within Nesta. So by calling for her power, she was inadvertently calling for the mask, because after all, they landed in this specific region when she already sensed something. So the mask was already close to her in the water, and now when she called out for it, it started being drawn towards her. It was literally like a magnet towards her. When the mask zooms into her hand, zoom, 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 Nesta does the only thing she can think of. No matter the risk, no matter the consequences, it's either this or death. She slams the mask onto her face. Honestly, Nesta, I would have done the exact same thing. Embrace the power! As we learned during last episode's Suriel Teatime, when she dons the mask, Nesta no longer requires air, which is good considering she's underwater right now. The Kelpie finally realizes what she is now wearing and drops her out of fear and shock. This Kelpie, an embodiment of hate and hunger, is now scared of her wearing the mask because it is pure power, pure death, a force more powerful than anything else here. The mask whispers to Nesta all of what she might do, also seeming to sigh, home. It's like it feels like it's home because Nesta is an extension of the Cauldron, and it's like the mask is now home with the Cauldron. It's home now with Lady Death, the master of the mask. Joined together, its magic flows through Nesta, a magic colder than her own and just as old. This colder than her own makes me think that Nesta's power is more than just death. Well, this mask is purely death, and that's why it's even colder than her magic. And with the mask's power, Nesta summons the dead. Not the thousands laying at the water's bottom, but about, a dozen at least to start out, to grab hold of the Kelpie and do what her own body cannot. Kill the Kelpie! I love how Nesta is... I don't even know where that voice came from. Kill the Kelpie! I love how Nesta is reflecting how all these terrible things in life have happened to her. And while she has survived, she has been helpless and afraid. But here, she is doing something about her pickle of a situation, fighting back with her powers, embracing her deadly magic, and thus the Cauldron's magic too. She can wield this to save herself, and damn it, that's what she's determined to do.
Skirting back up to the surface, Cassian is screaming for Nesta over and over again. Having caught her scent of urine on the water's edge, he knew something bad went down.
My poor Cassian. He is so terrified for her, and this is his worst nightmare playing out in real time. She's in the water no one should be in.
And then the surface of the water ripples. Golden light begins shining underneath, and like a forest rising from the water, soldiers upon soldiers rise up from the surface. They're kind of soldiers. They're skeletons. They're half-preserved, decaying flesh beings, jaws half hanging off. Then Nesta, holding a decapitated head of the Kelpie in her hand. Cold, primal power ripples through them, and both Cassian and Asriel yield to it, bowing to death herself. Thank you for the reenactment, Lexi. That was great. If you're not watching on YouTube, you're missing out. Because to stand against it is to stand against death herself.
They respect death. They're not about to mess with this power, and instead they honor it as Illyrian warriors do.
And then Lady Death takes off the mask, and the dead fall back into the watery depths. Like little puppets, like blow.
And we know we don't need to remind you how big of a deal it is that Nesta is taking off the mask. No one else has ever been able to do so. That's the curse of the mask. If you put it on, you cannot take it off and you will have to be beheaded. But Nesta, Cauldron Maid, and with the power of death within her, kin to the mask, is able to wear it and take it off. Not without its consequences, though. She's shaking uncontrollably and falls unconscious. What an eventful day, everybody, and it's not over yet. Back in the Night Court, the Hewn City's dungeons, to be exact, the Inner Circle discusses the situation with these two surviving Autumn Court soldiers. They're being tortured for information, but they're so far gone, and again, like rabid dogs, that they aren't exactly useful. While our crew guesses they are under an enchantment, they don't realize that these soldiers are under the Crown's influence, at least not yet. Asriel will suspect that Brialyn sent these Autumn Court soldiers, the ones who had gone missing after returning from the continent, to the Bog of Oorid in search of the crown, since Brialyn can't risk setting foot here in Prythian herself, at least not yet. And when they realized the Bat Boys were also here, the soldiers attacked. However, during Brialyn's end of book evil villain monologue, she'll tell Nesta she made sure Nesta knew of the trove too, so Nesta could be her unwitting partner in collecting the items of power from Prythian. I'm guessing Brialyn made sure Nesta knew of the trove by not being very secretive about her mission to track down the cauldron with the dread trove. I don't know exactly. Knowing that it would get back to the Night Court and Nesta is with them, who could also track the trove. Anyway, we will find out that Brialyn planted these Autumn Court soldiers in the bog to wait for Nesta to come and retrieve the mask. So then the soldiers can take it from her and give it to Brialyn. They've also been waiting here for a while, a few weeks up to a month. I'll give Silver Flame's Farah some credit, because I understand we've been a little detached from the Farah we've come to know and love. She doesn't like how they're torturing these enchanted soldiers. It doesn't seem fair to inflict this pain on them when they're incapable of giving any information or technically responsible for their attempted killing actions. She is concerned that their families are wondering where they are, and she wants the Inner Circle to wrap this up as quickly as possible so they can be returned to their families. That is the Farah that we know. Back at the Moonstone Palace, turns out Nesta was able to break through Rhys's wards and walk right into the room where the mask is being kept. The door was open, you guys! But in all seriousness, this shows how much the trove speaks to Nesta, almost literally as she is pulled toward it with it beckoning to her. Like calls to like, after all. The mask opened the door for her, dissolved Rhys's wards so its fellow who is also made can come to it. This is spooky stuff. That kind of power and connection between the trove and Nesta. I love it so much.
For the time being, this very powerful object needs to be warded, protected, and then some. It is notable how Amryn thinks to just go ahead and dump it in the sea. Again, another under the sea reference. I'm not going to guarantee. I don't know if I'm willing to die on this hill yet, but I'm halfway up the hill at this point to believing that we are going to the sea next book. Narbin, here we come. The Inner Circle agrees that Helion, sex god with a bod, must come and put
he must come.
And put some extra powerful wards on it, especially since Nesta got in through the wards so easily. Remember, she is made, Brialyn is made. If Nesta can get in, odds are Brialyn probably can too. We need some wards that have a little extra oomph to it, which Rhys suggests that Nesta is the only one who will know how to unlock it. But Nesta's like, no, I don't want that kind of power. While she does not voice the reason for this rejection out loud, we will later learn that she put the mask on in the bog. Every thought eddied out of her head. She did not understand fear or hate or grief or love, all things that Nesta feels in a abundance to the point of almost pain. And the thought of being able so easily to become that void, it terrifies her more than anything because it is so seductive, that freeing feeling, to the point that she knows it would be a constant temptation that would most likely drive her mad. So instead, it's agreed that Rhys will learn how to unward this room, and if needed, he will show Nesta.
I want to bring something up. If Brialyn is also made and can track the Dread Trove, I initially wondered what the point of these wards would be. If Nesta can get through the wards because she's drawn to the mask, wouldn't Brialyn be able to too? Wouldn't the mask just open up for her, who's also Cauldron made? And then I did realize, number one, Helian's wards would supposedly not even let Nesta in because that is part of his specialty power, although she's still able to summon the Trove to her, as we'll see at the end, but anyway. And number two, Nesta has the Cauldron's raw power that she took from it, while Brialyn is basically, I'll call it just made to be an old crone Fae. So I imagine the Trove answers far more to Nesta, is pulled toward her in a way that they aren't to Brialyn. Brialyn can track and wield the Trove, yes, but Nesta has a stronger connection and power over the Trove because of her power directly from the Cauldron. It's like Nesta is the Trove's true master, while Brialyn is just able to wield it.
Yes. In this scene, we get an obscene amount of like calls to like mentions. I love how that is Feyre's only line in this entire scene. Like calls to like. We get 3.
I will say this. It is like her. She's dealing with powers that are so far out of her expertise. And it's like, wait, I know this one. Like calls to like, everybody. I know that part of it.
What is like calls to like?
That is her contribution.
We get 3 mentions of like calls to like, which doesn't seem like a lot, but this is not a long scene, so it is a lot, which brings our count for the whole series now up to 13.
As Nesta takes the ultimate bath in this infinity pool on the top of a mountain that I am absolutely obsessed with. Like, when you ask me what court I want to be at, I want to live in the Moonstone Palace.
You know what part of my soul I would sell to be in that infinity pool tonight and tonight alone? Like, I want that so badly.
The one reason I want to do my very, very delayed honeymoon in Bali is because all I want is an infinity pool that overlooks a beautiful jungle. Like, that's all I want. So Nesta is in this bath. She's washing away all the marshland's yuckiness and she's cleansing herself. She reflects on how the mask's power scared her. Not necessarily so much of its ability to raise the dead, but the utter lack of feeling that accompanies wearing it. Like Nicole was saying there, it felt too good to feel nothing. To finally achieve that goal she's been chasing for so long, to escape her own head, her thoughts, her emotions. It was so freeing and so lovely that the mask's existence scares her because of how tempting that feeling is for her. Unfortunately, though, she is the only one who can keep it contained and safe, bringing about the sense of responsibility and need to fight temptation that is quite new for Nesta. I can appreciate that she recognizes how alluring the nothingness is, and that rather than immediately honing in on making it her goal to feel that again with the mask, Nesta instead is scared of the temptation because she knows better now. Not long ago, I honestly wonder if she would have been like, I don't care about the consequences of wearing the mask. Give me that escape from my own mind. But then Cassian comes into her room just to bring her dinner because, yep, once again, he proves how well he knows her and what she'd prefer, the quiet of her own space to eat. He genuinely did come in to bring her food and check in on her. In fact, he seems a little caught off guard by catching her in the bath in her nakedness when she makes it clear that she wants him, which Nicole will definitely be getting into in a few moments. He ensures she sets the pace and the location. She almost died today, after all, and he wants to be respectful of her wishes, never take advantage of her. But here Nesta is wanting to feel alive, to be with him, and he's not about to turn her down when her intentions are genuine.
And friends, they finally do the deed! Nesta, before Cassian, used sex as a way to escape her life and to help her feel nothing except for that momentary pleasure. But here, like Lexi is saying, Nesta wants to drive away the horrors of the day, and in its place, she wants life, which I absolutely am going to put this in the category of sex that enhances the plot for sure. Plus, it's a first sex scene between lovers. Prrr, touch, warmth, strength. She wants it all. And boy, oh boy, does he give it to her?
I agree so much with you about her feeling the need to experience feeling alive after this difficult day. Nesta's not trying to drown out her roiling power or self-hatred. She's seeking pleasure and comfort to gain versus escape from her inner demons. This is very much like what we talked about with the Rhys and Ferris sex scenes after their battles. Because while it wasn't the reader's favorite scenario, it made sense that they were intimate after almost dying that day. To feel alive again, to feel that closeness and assuredness that the other is still here too, still alive. Cassian and Nesta both acknowledged that they thought the other died today. And here they are needing to feel each other in the most intimate way, to feel that reassurance.
These Cassian and Nesta sex scenes, they are not soft and romantic like Rhys and Feyre's sex scenes are, specifically chapter 55. These sex scenes are wild, carnal, hard. Yeah, they are. Just like these two people, just like Cassian is right now.
I made the same note about that with the Cassian and Nesta sex scenes and how it really represents their personalities. I will say too, there is a softness when he first starts, easing into it literally and holding each other's gazes before they go hard. There is still that sense of intimacy, and it's not just like completely wild and feral and all that. They really do have that connection with each other. And that's partly why they're able to be so free with one another in the scene.
Well, and as Nesta will call it later, there is a difference between her and Cassian making love, and there's a difference between her and Cassian fucking. And here, it definitely feels like starting off as that, like, it's new, it's exciting, but it all still feels like fucking, especially because it is, as Cassian will note, just sex. Some quick highlights from the scene. Cassian's dirty talk. Oh my God. I am not going to quote it. I quote a lot of things into a microphone, but I cannot say those and make eye contact with my sister at the same time.
It still makes me blush in the best way, no matter how many times I've read this book. As we're talking about dirty talk here, Cassian also guides Nesta into how to dirty talk too. She doesn't start strong like anything. He's like, oh, come on, you can do better than that. Yeah. But with his questions and easiness, she sure gets going with her dirty talk too. She opens up a little bit more. She's playing around with it. This is a safe space for them to be their dirty, sexy selves, and he helps her lean into it.
The second thing I want to point out is Cassian saying, quote, "Do you like seeing me kneel before you?" Again, SJM, men in their knees. But also, this is, do you like the sight of me kneeling before you? This is a Rhys and Cassian direct one-to-one comparison. Number 3, right before he slides all the way in, he tells her to look at him. This is an instant Nicole kicks her legs up in the air, screams, squeals, is an eyes on me moment, especially with the mates foreshadowing. The quote, heat blazed in his eyes, and something more than that. Mates, 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 mates. Number 4, of course, Nesta telling Cassian that she wants him deeper. His eyes go wild. He's like, deeper, ma'am? Okay. I don't think he's heard that a lot. And lastly, 5, Lexi, we get the first his seed mention. What are your thoughts on seed?
Why do you keep putting me on the spot with these sex questions? I mean, in this context, I guess I prefer reading that versus his cum. Like, I don't know. I am indifferent.
Thank you for answering honestly. I think at first I hated it, and I think now I've just read so much romantasy where I'm like, okay, yeah.
I've read worse. I will say that. I've read worse descriptions.
That is factually accurate. As Cassian is telling her that her sex is the most beautiful sex he's ever seen, and he is not talking about the act of sex that they just had, I should note.
Talking about her vagina.
Yes, thank you. His face looks utterly devastated, and that's when he reaches for his clothes. Which, pause, here is my headcanon. It dawns on Cassian that he just saw the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. And if we know anything from reading romantasy, it is that whenever something is described as the most beautiful they've ever seen, 9 times out of 10, they're mates. Cassian just realizes by staring at her ass up in the air that they are officially mates.
We have another ass man. He and Xaden would get along.
Rhys is a boob man. Cassian is an ass man. Asriel's still up for debate, and we'll find out hopefully someday. And Cassian, after realizing, after staring at his mate's ass up in the air, that he is devastated because it is just sex between them. When in reality, he is jealous of the love that his friends have. He wants to be lovey-dovey and touchy with his mate, just like Reese and Feyre are with each other. But here he's getting just sex. And that's not a criticism to them, but it's really showcasing how he wants more.
I think that he knows, and he's also trying to deny that they are mates still. Like, it's like his subconscious absolutely knows, but he's not even daring to think it into existence here. I also think that Cassian knows that Nesta knows deep down that it is so much more than just sex. And he's kind of like, okay, I'll go along with this here, kind of thing.
Definitely. And then Cassian leaves with no snuggling. I love that line in Nesta's inner monologue. Quote, she'd said just sex, but had thought it might at least come with some cuddling. I love how it's said in the audiobook. That's so funny. Nesta's like, didn't you see the study that said you should cuddle with your partner at least 6 to 10 minutes after sex? Did you know that, Lexi? There's a little fun fact for you.
I did not know that was an actual study.
The next shit I talk about with my husband, apparently. Have you seen this study?
The next morning, back at the House of Wind training ring, the three best friends are doing their curls and have the training kind, not the hair kind, and having the most relatable girl talk. You took him to your bed, didn't you? Emery not so subtly guesses. And then I just love how when Nesta basically admits they did, it's Gwen that asks, so was it good? These friends aren't just talking about books and training. They're creating a true bond of friendship where they can tease and play with each other, ask intimate questions without it being invasive, and feel comfortable to open up with one another. I love so much how they're all giggly and Cassian's in full trainer mode, like, you too, Archeron. As much as they keep gazing at each other during today's training session, they're still keeping their sex life out of the training ring for the most part. And he isn't treating her differently when it comes to coaching her through exercises. If anything, it's this fun, not so secret that they share that builds more tension.
But Gwen, helping her friend from being so distracted by a tall hunk of muscle, she tells Nesta about a Valkyrie exercise called mind stilling, which is, for lack of a better word, the Valkyrie version of meditation, where the Illyrian warriors are all rage in the face of battle. Valkyries find those heightened emotions to be distracting and instead train their minds to be sharp as their blades so that they can keep calm and battle on. Plus, it helped them face their fears, settle their minds in hard battle, and fight against whatever inner demons they possess. How does it work, you ask? I'm going to give you a little TLDR as we're going to go way deeper into it next episode. You sit somewhere comfortable, both alert and at ease, and breathe, letting your mind go. Again, we'll go through the exact step-by-step next episode because there's a little more to it, and it's not as simple as breathing. It requires consistent practice, sometimes doing it upwards of 3 to 4 times per day.
Speaking from experience, this is so on point with meditation, and I appreciate that mind stilling isn't something you just get. It requires practice, concentration, and grace. I am not very good at meditation. My brain is always going a million miles a minute, but I, admittedly inconsistently, make it part of my routine, and after practicing a lot and feeling like I'm never good at it, I realize that I do get better at it. Our minds are so powerful, and meditation is the gold star example of what we're mentally capable of. Nesta perks up at the idea of learning how to quiet her mind in this way. Mind stilling might be exactly what she needs to help herself. She also wants to keep this a secret between these three friends. This isn't anything against Cassian, but rather she notes that it's something she'll be able to surprise him with when she learns how to be unflappable. I do believe that this goes a lot deeper than that, though. This is a form of training she can do only with her friends, something they share that doesn't involve anyone else, that stays between them and helps strengthen their bond and help them on their individual healing journeys. Stilling her mind is deeply personal for Nesta, and it becomes another personal goal of hers to sharpen the skill, not unlike how the stairs have become her own endeavor, but this is something she wants to be exclusively between her and her friends.
Being totally 100% mature and not at all laughing at the idea of handling a wooden sword. And of course, not laughing at the, quote, double-handed grip on the hilt. Don't choke up too close to the shaft. Which, side note, I love how Cassian was like, I ran into that one.
I am not mature for this. Like, again, my husband, he plays a lot of golf and they're always talking about shafts and balls. And I am like just a giggly little middle schooler when it comes to that. And this is the same thing. Like, I read that and I just burst out laughing every single time.
Dick jokes aside, Cassian begins teaching Nesta the 8 different cuts and blocks of swordplay. But the second that practice sword is raised up by Nesta, something slides into place and the whole training room goes silent. Even Lexi and I with our little middle school dick jokes, knowing that this moment was somehow vital to them all.
As Nesta lifts the sword, quote, it was like a key sliding into a lock at last. As she begins practicing what Cassian showed her, the movements begin flowing faster, sure, quote, her breath clicked in sync with her body with each thrust. And she starts envisioning herself not in this training ring with wooden swords, but as a warrior facing down her enemies. And each of these movements, this control of her body, is a fight for survival and for victory. She sees those she has faced in instances where she felt utterly helpless. The Kelpie, remember how just pages ago she felt helpless and terrified, initially frozen with fear when it approached her. Thomas, who tried to take what wasn't his and make her feel less than. The King of Hybern, who forced her into the cauldron without a care or second thought. The cauldron itself taking control away from her very being and enveloping her in the darkest depths of darkness. Even all those people while they were poor, who sneered at them and acted all smug as her family almost starved to death. We may be only halfway through this book and still with a lot more of her healing journey to go, but this is such a turning point for Nesta. It's when she chooses to face her theoretical enemies and fight against them, not out of pure instinct or desperation, but with skill, control, and precision. Before our very eyes, she's becoming the force to be reckoned with, a victor, her own savior. She is in real time transforming into a warrior. And this part, it just gives me chills and makes me tear up every single time.
And we get the iconic moment, and sorry about it because I'm quoting the whole damn thing. Quote, every hated enemy, every moment she'd been powerless against them simmering to the surface. And with each movement of the sword, each breath, a thought formed. It echoed with every inhale, every thrust and block. Never again. Never again would she be weak. Never again would she be at someone's mercy. Never again would she fail. Never again, never again, never again. There are many reasons why we read fantasy. To escape into worlds, to imagine that we have magical powers, to fall in love with characters. But this is one of the biggest, at least for me. This is a moment of someone who has felt powerless, out of control, like a failure, at others' mercy her entire life. And this is her saying, this is my life, and I am taking the reins now. You do not have to like Nesta's character to feel the power in these sentences. You do not have to feel connected to Nesta to feel connected to this feeling. You do not have to be in Nesta's shoes to know exactly what it's like to come into your own. I know I've had moments in my life where I felt like an utter failure. I was told that I was not going to graduate from my college program because my performing levels were too low. And after falling into a state of fear, sadness, and pure anger at myself for letting things get so bad, I had a never again moment. Never again would I be my own bully. Never again would I let others dictate my success. Never again would I let fear haunt me from going after my dreams. And while there are moments of still wavering, definitely there are moments, that mindset shift changed everything for me, ending with me graduating on time and as a cum laude. Reading fantasy is about characters going on a journey, and part of that journey is them taking power back into their own hands. This is a moment that is not just reserved for fantasy characters, though, but for anyone who needs a reminder that your life is incredibly your own and you are incredibly powerful.
Let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book and speculation for what's next.
I feel like we're going back into ACOSF because we get all the mates foreshadowing, from Cassian being ready to kill, eliminate, destroy any threat that comes to Nesta when he hears her screaming in her dream, or every ounce of Nesta's blood and bone going on high alert when Cassian comes up to her in the training ring after they slept together. And that's just 2. There's a million. But honestly, this episode's long enough as is.
How much Azriel doesn't like having to summon Lucian for obvious reasons. He is crushing so hard on Elaine and doesn't want to interact with her mate more than he absolutely has to. I really wonder if we're going to get a blood duel between the two of them.
Ooh. Nesta swear to Rhys. Quote, I will not say a word to Feyre. Oops.
This could be nothing, but I still need to point it out. While at the Moon Palace, Nesta watches the most beautiful sunset she's ever beheld. There's a lot of emphasis on this amazing sunset and how it fills her, clearing away any lingering trace of the bog's darkness. And then immediately after the second time she's taking in the sunset, she begins thinking about the mask's power. Could this be foreshadowing about the Dust Court and how she has the power to resurrect it? Maybe?
Yes, I thought this too. Yes.
While having sex, I have to pull out this line because maybe it's speculation. Quote, a conquering warrior god. He had called her Lady Death, and he was her sword. Nicole mentioned a few episodes ago, and we were even talking about it earlier this episode, about how Cassian might not be High Lord or High King, but something like Nesta's High General, her right hand, her knight, while she's the main ruler. This line basically encompasses that, so maybe it will be their future.
Ooh, I think so, yes. All right, friends, it is time to sip some tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi sits down with the Suriel, RIP, and sips some tea and walks through a world-building topic to help us better understand this world and the people in it.
Today's Suriel topic is the Bog of Oorid and the monsters that lurk in it. We already did the middle for our Suriel Teatime in ACOSF episode 8, but I purposely didn't go much into the Bog of Oorid because I saved it for today's episode. The bog is located in the middle that separates the solar quartz to the north and the seasonal quartz to the south. Remember from our Suriel segment on the middle that it is forbidden to map the middle beyond vague landmarks, and it is a place where wild magic still dwells and thrives and feeds. It is respected as its own entity. The Bog of Oorid is a region within the middle and was once a sacred place, but a long time ago, say, 15,000 years ago, it turned into a place of pure evil, and it is now a wasteland where its essence speaks of death and decay. The bog, which is another word for marshlands, only has gray, watery light instead of true sunlight. There are patches of cold mist hovering above the water, obscuring sight. The air here is heavy, full of slow-running water, and it smells of mold and loomy earth. There is no wind here to move the oppressive air, which can muffle sound and absorb screams so they don't echo. The bog water is freezing cold and black as ink, still and flat like an obsidian mirror. It is said that the water from the Bog of Oorid flows to under the mountain, and the creatures who live here have long used these waterways to travel through the middle and even into the surrounding courts. There are small islands of grass and dead trees. The Bog of Oorid is eerily empty of animal life. There are no birds or insects here to break the absolute silence. However, it is home to dangerous fairies, which we will get to in a moment. When it was a sacred place, warriors were laid to rest here in its inky black waters. Under the water is littered with the weapons and bodies of thousands of soldiers. Some are mere bones and others are partially preserved, half-eaten beneath their ancient armor. The mask, one of the Dread Trove items, was hidden here before, well, this episode. Way back in our ACOTAR coverage, we had a Suriel Teatime on the creatures of Prythian, but I purposefully did not include the creatures found in the middle, because the middle is protected and keeps these creatures separate without punishing them for being what they're made to be. They've either found refuge here or have been placed here by courts who don't want them in their territory. If you hunt these creatures without provocation, you might find yourself trapped here, which would be terrifying. So now is the time to go through these creatures. And guess what? The ones we know of most are found in the Bog of Oorid. First, we have Kelpies. Humans know them as water horses or nixies. Kelpies are a species of fairies that eat both mortals and fairies. And while they can shapeshift to appear beautiful and innocent, Kelpies have a humanoid appearance, but with the notable difference of moving on all four limbs instead of two. Their skin is whiter than bone with a thin and bony chest, hiding how strong it truly is. They have fingers as long as Nesta's forearms with 4 joints and dagger-sharp nails. They have enormous black eyes with no whites showing, sharp facial features, and obsidian black hair. And, this part is gross, too wide of a mouth with sensuous lips, twin rows of rotted teeth, jagged as shards of glass, and a long black tongue. It is within a Kelpie's nature to lure and kill, much like a wolf is designed to hunt its prey. They also rape and torment. You absolutely do not want to get near one of these terrible creatures. Given the Kelpie in the bog spoke the ancient fairy dialect that hasn't been used in 15,000 years, we can assume Kelpies have a very, 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 very long lifespan. As water-based creatures, Kelpies are powerful swimmers and can breathe underwater. They can even breathe into their prey's mouth mouth to keep them alive. History claims that kelpies were one of the first true monsters of fairies and were made by a cruel god, at least according to legend. I wonder if they were possibly created by the Daglan, but that is pure speculation. Kelpies were deposited throughout the waters of the world. They were known as shapeshifters who dwelled in the lakes and rivers and lured unwitting people into their arms. After they drowned them, they feasted on their flesh. As creatures of this cruel god, they cannot breed and reproduce. In ancient times, Fae and humans believed kelpies were river and lake gods and sacrificed living people to them. It suggested that this was started to prevent them from crawling out of the waters to steal children. After a while, they were hunted down and the surviving ones have vanished, most likely venturing to the middle where they can be protected. Cassian says they haven't been seen in hundreds of years since before he was born. So let's say approximately 1,000 years ago, since Cassian is 500. Kelpies are now considered a myth whispered around fires and a warning for children not to play near the water. If Nesta's mother's cousin was indeed killed by a kelpie, it's possible that it was one of the survivors and it lurked in the mortal realm's waters. This kelpie Nesta killed, or had the dead people kill, may have been the last remaining or one of the last in the bog, who had been biding its time for these 15,000 years. It is also rumored that witches dwell in the Bog of Oorid, banished here by various high lords. In the ACOTAR world, witches are individuals who amass more power than their natural reserves should allow them, as they use spells and archaic tools to harness more power than the cauldron assigned them. According to Cassian, humans and other creatures can become witches, but the witches in the bog aren't the human kind of witches, which I know Nicole is freaking out about that line. These witches used to be something else, and then their thirst for magic and power turned them into wretched creatures, banished here by the High Lords. It is also said that witches drink young blood to fill the coldness the magic left in them. As far as we know, we have not encountered a witch in this series, especially one of these really creepy ones. We know we have not encountered one of those. Lastly, light singers are also known to inhabit these deadly marshlands. Like Nicole was saying earlier, they are ethereal beings who lure their prey to them, appearing as friendly faces when their prey is lost. Then only when their prey is in their arms do they expose their true faces, making it so the horrors of their faces are the last thing their prey sees before they're drowned in the bog. Unlike other races, light singers kill only for sport instead of food, and they love to kill both fairies and mortals. And that, friends, is our Suriel Teatime Part 1. We have a little more to go for Part 2 in Maasverse Madness.
Let us close out this ACOTAR-only part of the episode with our Fae-vorite Moments.
I love how the House of Wind communicates with Nesta. It takes care of her, it tries to get her to scry, and then she can even taste its disappointment in the air. The house truly has come alive and is Nesta's friend, and I love how it's conveyed in these small moments when she's otherwise alone.
Cassian recalling getting in one tiny little fight that might have resulted in one tiny little building being destroyed in the summer court. That writing was perfection.
The fact that Feyre goes to bed by 9 and takes naps every day because she's so exhausted from pregnancy. Same, girl, same. The utter tiredness you feel from pregnancy is next level, and I would also take daily naps and still be asleep by 9 when I was pregnant. I've never related so much to an FMC as I did with this little tidbit. Cassian says that if the mask is in the water, quote, "Az and I will draw straws like the tough warriors we are, and the loser goes in." I laugh out loud every time I read this, and it is one more reason why Cassian is my number one book boyfriend. As Nesta falls into a routine of training with her friends and bonding over books, I love this line because it encapsulates her growth so simply but so impactfully. Quote, "Nesta woke on the 4th morning and found herself excited to see them again." The found family trope in this book is just so beautiful.
Rhys shoving Feyre behind him and then her shoving her way back to his side. If you have been listening to Fantasy Fangirls for a while, you know one of my biggest pet peeves is when a guy shoves the girl behind him. This is just why she is my high lady. I love her. In the Bog of Oorid prep, Cassian is on his knees, helping Nesta into her knife buckles and straps before they go into the middle. Where have we seen this before? Do you enjoy the sight of me kneeling before you? Rhys did the same thing before taking Feyre into the middle in ACOMF. When Cassian gets all territorial about Helion coming on to Nesta, Rhys says into Cassian's mind, quote, "You wear your heart for all to see, brother." I love that Rhys is like, "You're not being subtle, bro." Especially coming from Rhys, who was too subtle that the Suriel had to be like, hold my beer. Rhys winnows Nesta back to the house after her and Cassian bang, bang, bangity bang for the first time, and he is described as too neutral. Now, I'm sure he's too neutral because he's grappling with what's going on with him and Feyre and the baby and all that kind of stuff, but also he totally knows what went down the night before and is probably also trying to play it cool. Like, you reek of my brother's cum, girl. Oh, God.
His seed, Nicole. I know that we already talked about this, but I'm bringing it up again because it's too goddamn funny. During training the next day, and Nesta's like, so when do we start with swords? And Cassian says, quote, you think you're ready to handle a sword? To which she replies, only you can tell me that.
This is my kind of humor and I love it. All right, friends, we are about to begin a beefy Maasverse Madness section. But before we do, we are so excited to shower our new Inner Circle Patreon members with so much love and appreciation and gratitude. We love you all so much. So huge welcome to Caitlin B and Haley H.
Thank you so much for being part of our Inner Circle. We appreciate you so much. Now, today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for both Throne of Glass and Crescent City series. So if you have not read all of the Maasverse books, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode, we will be covering Silver Flames chapters 39 through 46.
And if you're like, hey, I want my name read out on the episode, you can join the Patreon party by going to patreon.com/fantasyfangirls.
And also, please be sure to give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod. We have so much more content on there, and we don't want you to miss any of it.
And last but not least, please do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It takes 5 seconds to hit that 5-star rating. Write a little love note in the review section if you want to, and it is one of the most helpful things that you can do, not just for this podcast, but for any podcasts that you listen to. Let's get into Maasverse Madness.
Yes, indeed. Okay, friends, we are officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from the entire Maasverse. So please only continue listening if you've read all the books in both Throne of Glass and Crescent City. Let's continue with our part 2 of Suriel Teatime regarding the Bog of Oorid, because some major historical events happened here. But first, we know from Celine's download that after Thea and Theon defeated the Daglin and ruled as High King and Queen, Theon wanted to pass the crown after his passing to their eldest daughter Helena instead of his wife Thea, because he didn't believe she was a worthy successor and he thought it was time to let the next generation rule after he was gone. Well, Thea and her general, soon-to-be lover Peleus, did not like High King Theon's decision and made plans to overthrow him, which brings us back to the Bog of Oorid. It used to be the Daglin's private game park where they crafted terrible monsters to serve as worthy prey. That's what I think the Kelpie was created for. While Theon, Thea, and Peleus were hunting in the bog, a Kelpie dragged a bound and gagged Theon into the water's inky depths. Quote, the once proud king screaming as he went under. And Thea and Peleus just let it happen, watching impassively. I'm also guessing they were the ones who bound and gagged him in the first place. Then Thea summoned Gwydion / the Star Sword, which was Theon's cauldron-made sword, and Truth Teller, its twin, which had been his dear friend Analius's, who died in the war, from the waters where they had been dragged down on Theon's person. And when she held the sword and dagger, starlight flared from Thea as well as the blades glowed with their own starlight, reacting to the starborn power. This empowered Thea to become the ruling High Queen, now in possession of the 4 objects of the trove and both sword and dagger. So why is all of this important and applicable to the bog in the present day? Number 1, the bog is described as, quote, dead trees, gray with age and weather, jutted like the broken lances of 1,000 soldiers, some draped with curtains of moss. No leaves clung to their branches. Before Theon was dragged underwater by the Kelpie, maybe this Kelpie that Nesta slays, this land was lush with grass and trees in bloom. But the moment he died, literally the moment he died, petals began falling from the trees, and it was as if the land died with its king. So here we are more than 15,000 years later, seeing this dead land still mourning the loss of its king. Number 2, in the Bog of Oorid, Nesta sees soldiers in ancient armor and, quote, judging by their fine armor, they were warriors and kings and princes and lords.
So we have to wonder if these were Theon's men. Like this, I read that and I was like, oh!
I read that too, and we know, according to legend, this land used to be sacred, so could they have been laid to rest here along with their weapons as a final honor well before the king was killed? Or maybe a battle against the Daglin took place here. There's thousands of soldiers, so I don't think it was only from this one hunting excursion.
Yes, I love the idea that this is one of the battles against the Daglin, and that's where this took place, especially given the number. In Celine's download, it's also only mentioned that Fionn, Thea, and Peleus are here. But based on this description, it feels way too on the nose not to be a Fionn nod. There's also the first soldier who stands up and like helps Nesta against the Kelpie. In my head canon, that is Fionn.
It could be personal revenge against the Kelpie because he was also killed by the Kelpie.
Oh my god, that's so good!
Also, we do know that after the Daglin were defeated, that the land really came alive again without them literally feeding off of its magic and all of the people's magic too. So maybe that's what really brought this land back up. And after High King Fionn was defeated and killed, he was somehow tethered to this magic of the land or something along those lines. I don't know exactly, but just some fun speculation there.
Because Fionn and Thea ruled for, and I think it's described as a millennia after they defeated the Daglin. So that is entirely possible. Yes.
And then she ruled for another millennia after he was defeated. Yes. While the Inner Circle doesn't know how the mask ended up here, my guess is that Thea was inspired by the location of Fionn's downfall, and she came back here to hide the mask before she went to Midgard, especially now that it seems cursed and the land is dying. She's like, nobody else is going to come here. This is a great place to hide the mask.
We've also heard of another Kelpie in House of Earth and Blood. It's a little less than 1 year before the start of our story. Bryce tried to convince Jessica on Lahaba's behalf to get some iris eels to brighten up the space. Instead, she got a Kelpie, quote, that had humped the glass with all the finesse of a wasted college guy. God damn it, I love Crescent City. Later in the book, Jessica brings in a knock, which in Celine's download, when they're in the Bog of Oorid part and she's showing all of that, they see a Kelpie, and Bryce notes how it looks like a relative of the knock.
Speaking of the Kelpie, it speaks a 15,000-year-old language, as we were talking about, one that Rhys and Amren know, which is how they will communicate with Bryce before she takes the magic bean. Rhys only understands every other word here, but he communicates pretty well with Bryce, so he must have brushed up on his Babel app in between diaper changes.
Taking a bit of a pivot, this is also not the first time in the Maasverse that we've seen silver fire. I have been waiting to talk about this. In Empire of Storms, when Deanna possesses Aelin at Skull's Bay, quote, cold white light, tendrils flickered, silver flame. And that's when it dawns on Rowan that this is not the wildfire she's about to unleash, but moonfire. So cold it burned, quote, the cold of the stars, the cold of stolen light. I love the stars, like kind of a tie into the Night Court. Stolen light. Stolen, I always just associate with Nesta. I don't think that this means necessarily that Nesta is a descendant of Deanna, but a comment on a Reddit post, snarf, snarf, snark, mentions, I say that 5 times fast.
That sounds like a South Park reference. Like
it might be.
No, like it is actually.
Mentions how it could be because the cauldron's power is that of the god's power. So Deanna's power was utilized in the cauldron, or one with the cauldron, part of the cauldron, and that's one of the parts that Nesta took. I also couldn't help but notice that Deanna is also known as Lady of the Hunt. Could this be tied with the Wild Hunt? I have no idea. Some people also wonder if Deanna is Nesta in a different timeline. To be quite honest, I don't know how that would work unless Tog is way in the future, which wouldn't really line up with what we know about shifters and Hofas and all of that.
Oh yeah, I don't, because then Aelin falls through the Akatar world and Rhys slows her down, which is this winter solstice in our story that we'll be coming to here shortly. So I think that the whole time jump things, like we already got realm worlds. I think it's all on the same timeline.
I agree. And I think personally, I love this idea that Nesta and Deanna are tied somehow, but I do think that it is just similar powers and a fun nod to the similarities in these different universes.
I want to pull out this quick little nod of foreshadowing between Azriel and Nesta in House of Flame and Shadow. In chapter 32 of Silver Flames, Nesta thinks how the two of them could be allies. And it would be so cool to see their friendship and camaraderie on the page months later in House of Flame and Shadow.
I love Nesta and Azriel in House of Flame and Shadow. Like Brett and I just got to Caves Part 1 and oh my God, I love them so much.
Me too. It's also, again, so hard to not act like House of Flame and Shadow is quite a full-blown sequel after Silver Flames, because otherwise we'd have a whole other episode here in Maasverse Madness. So I just wanted to pull out that one little one.
Earlier how I was like, yeah, I don't think Nesta's powers are gone. We know they're not gone because
we know that they're not gone. Yes.
The dungeons of the Hewn City. While in the interrogation room with the 2 surviving soldiers, we learn that whatever remains of the bodies that Azriel is working on, it goes through the hatches in the center of the room, which leads to a pit of beasts below. We will become so familiar with this in House of Flame and Shadow when Bryce is stuck in that same room, or at least a room like it, and opens the grate to winnow down to the beasts who do not attack her. And this does lead to her, again, part 1 of Cave's conquest. Also, in that interrogation room, guilt and shame cloud Reese's eyes because of how Feyre feels with the way that they're treating these soldiers who are not in their right minds. I think that this is the moment, and maybe possibly others like it stacked on top of this, that was the real turning point for Reese using his powers with prisoners more sparingly, and why he didn't look into Bryce's mind and instead asks for permission at the beginning of House of Flame and Shadow. And of course, Bryce shot him down. I am still team, if someone dropped from the sky and was claiming that these evil things called Asteri had it out for my planet, I would definitely do some mind sleuthing, but that's just me.
I will say, I also do think that she came from a place of good intentions. Like, she wasn't, I'll call it a bad guy, at least as far as they knew. Like, the jury was still out. And so he didn't want to initially jump to those conclusions of treating her like a prisoner. It's more of treating her like we don't know what to do with you yet. Let's figure this out here.
So they put her in a dungeon with a grate with beasts below it that growled at her when she threw peas
But you know what I mean. Like, she's like just wanting help. She's asking for help. She's not trying to kill anybody. She's an anomaly that they don't know what to do with her versus her being a bad guy.
But she hasn't stolen Azriel's emotional support dagger yet. And that
no, of course not. Yeah. Anyway, friends. Okay, let's wrap this episode up. It has been quite the long one, huh? Next week, let's say it again. We are covering chapters 39 through 46 of Silver Flames.
Thank you very, very much to our new content researcher, Brooke, for helping Lexi on the Suriel. Holy gods. Also, thank you, as always, to our executive producer, Hayden, aka our sanity manager. We flippin' love ya. And of course, share this episode with your fellow Silver Flame friends. Honestly, so much happened in this episode. I don't even have something to pick. My brain is mush. We've been going for almost 6 hours. I need to be done. Share this episode with your friends.
All right. And on that note, we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye. The Western Wind is a banger song from Carly Rae Jepsen. From Carly Rae Jepsen.
That's not something you want to play around with, like the water bottle. I keep wanting to say buffalo. Like the water buffalo.
I definitely did have to look up how babies are made to make sure I was
Nicole,
absolutely using
I can tell you how babies are made.